I caught my wife with another man, and just moments later, we were in a devastating car crash. Now, I'm typing this from a hospital room where my wife, Eleanor, lies heavily sedated. The doctors say she'll fully recover. She has a broken shoulder, fractured collarbone, for broken ribs, and a punctured lung. I got away with cuts and bruises, but the real damage runs much deeper. This all started the night before we were supposed to leave for a vacation in Mexico. Eleanor wanted one last night out with her longtime friend Vanessa. It had started snowing, and I suggested she stay home, but she insisted she'd be back at a reasonable hour. I went to bed around 10 p.m. and woke up at 5 a.m. to find her car still missing. More snow had fallen overnight. Assuming she had too much to drink and stayed at Vanessa's, I texted her saying I'd come pick her up and asked her not to drive. The message went unread. When I got to Vanessa's condo, the front door was unlocked. I checked the living room empty. Not wanting to disturb Vanessa in her bedroom downstairs, I headed upstairs to the guest room. That's when everything unraveled. I opened the door and saw two heads on the pillow. I pulled back the blanket and found my wife lying on some stranger's bare chest. The next thing I remember is being pulled away by Vanessa, Eleanor, and the half-naked man. I don't remember attacking him, but apparently I did. I told Eleanor she had 5 minutes to get in my car or not to come home at all. She was in the car in 3. Emotions running high, the roads covered in snow. We didn't stand a chance when another vehicle veered into our lane, sending us through a guardrail. Our children Davis, 10, and Sarah, 6, are still at my parents' house. They don't know about the accident. I haven't called anyone yet. This wasn't just a wreck on the road. It was a wreck of my entire life. I'm still trying to process the full extent of what's been shattered before pulling anyone else into this chaos. As if that wasn't enough, DNA tests ordered during Eleanor's treatment revealed something even more crushing: years of secret affairs, and that Sarah isn't biologically mine. Confronting her with this truth led to a breakdown, and now she's under sedation and psychiatric care. I don't know who the person in that hospital bed really is anymore. I want to ask her so many questions, but I'm not sure I can handle the answers. The moment she cheated, our marriage was over in my eyes. And I can't help but wonder if she ever truly loved me at all. The only thing keeping me in this room is the thought of our kids. I want to see them so badly, but the scratches on my face and neck would raise too many questions. Eleanor didn't just betray me, she destroyed our family. The kids need their mother, but how am I supposed to sit here and watch over someone who stabbed me in the back? Should I call her parents? And if I do, what do I even say? What do I tell the children? I can explain the accident, sure, but I can't pretend to feel emotional support for their mother. They'll sense something's wrong. How did it come to this? What I've discovered so far is only the beginning. I know that much. I understand I need to speak with a lawyer, but beyond that, I feel completely lost. The immediate choices, the days and weeks ahead, it's overwhelming. Eleanor and I met when we were 16. We dated all through high school and college. Until recently, we'd only ever been with each other. We got married a year after graduation, and Davis was born a year later. 3 years after that, Sarah came along, and from the start, I've showered her with love. I adore our kids more than anything in this world. Honestly, if not for them, I don't know if I'd still be here. Things started changing about 3 months ago. I noticed us drifting apart, but I couldn't put my finger on the reason. We're both 34 and have known each other for more than half our lives. I thought we were happy. I thought our family was strong. I thought I knew her. But now, sitting here watching her in that hospital bed, the woman I shared my life with, the mother of my children, I realize I don't know her at all. The betrayal is so sharp, it feels like a physical wound, like someone has driven a spike through my chest. The nurse came in earlier to check her vitals, and I forced myself to play along. We chatted about the snow, my injuries, her medication schedule. Just another normal conversation while my world quietly falls apart. I'll stay through the night, but tomorrow I need to face reality. The kids are going to ask about their mom. They'll want to see her. I can't keep them away, but I also can't keep pretending everything's okay. What steps do I take now? How do I protect my children from the consequences of their mother's actions? How do I even begin to rebuild after this? That night, I made the decision to stay one more night at the hospital. With the lights dimmed and Eleanor sedated, I leaned back in the recliner, staring at the ceiling while the machines beeped quietly around me. I kept replaying everything, trying to understand how my life had unraveled this way. A part of me felt like staying in the room was an act of mercy she didn't deserve. And yet, another part of me, one I wish didn't exist, still felt something for her. I hated that. I hated myself for it. I didn't want to feel anything but anger. But those feelings, however faint, were still there. And they made me feel weak. No matter how many times I played it over in my head, one thing was clear: there's no going back. Nothing will ever be the same. It felt like a hurricane had torn through my life, leaving everything Eleanor and I had built in ruins. I completely broke down. The weight of realizing that a major chapter of my life had ended hit me with full force. The next morning, when the nurse came to take blood samples, I quietly excused myself. As I headed toward the door, Eleanor stirred and called out my name, but I pretended not to hear her. I left to get some breakfast, though I barely had the appetite to eat. While scrolling through my phone, I noticed an unread text from Vanessa asking where Eleanor was. I ignored it. By 7 a.m., I figured it was late enough to visit Eleanor's parents. Her father has always been an early riser, so I planned to speak with him first and let him decide whether to wake her mother. I saw smoke rising from the wood stove in his workshop behind the house, so I knocked and stepped inside. The moment he saw me, he noticed the bruises and scratches on my face and neck. I told him there had been a car accident and that Eleanor was injured, but said we needed to talk before I shared more details. He assumed I wanted to explain the crash, so he woke his wife, and we all sat at the kitchen table. I told them how a car had swerved into our lane, and that, driving a heavier vehicle with four-wheel drive, I managed to keep us on the road until we hit a guardrail. The impact struck the passenger side, and although the side airbags deployed, Eleanor was seriously hurt. I reassured them that she was stable and expected to fully recover. They both cried, clearly relieved she was going to be okay, and immediately began discussing how they could help me take care of her. That's when I interrupted and explained the accident wasn't the main reason for my visit. I told them how I woke up early that morning, realized Eleanor hadn't come home, and drove through the snow to find her. I described walking in on her with a man I'd never seen before, and how I lost control in that moment. Their expressions turned to shock. I gave them the number to her hospital room and made it clear I wanted them to remain part of our children's lives. I told them my father was watching the kids, and that I was divorcing Eleanor because she had broken our vows. I added that I'd be telling the children about the accident and the separation, but not about their mother's infidelity. I made it clear I wasn't the one who destroyed our marriage or our life. They tried to talk me out of it, saying she had made a mistake and offering the usual justifications. I just smiled, told them I'd always enjoyed having them as in-laws, and walked out. When I got to my dad's house, I entered through the kitchen, where he was drinking his morning coffee. The last he'd heard, I was supposed to be on vacation in Mexico. He stood up and asked what I was doing there. I didn't say anything. I just walked over, hugged him, and broke down. He seemed to understand I needed to get it out before talking. He led me to the den and called for my mom. We asked her to sit and have her coffee first, but she immediately knew something was wrong. When my mom saw me there that early, I explained how I'd caught Eleanor cheating, then went on to describe the accident and her injuries. I told them I'd already informed her parents so they could visit her. My parents were stunned, and when my mom asked what I planned to do, I told them that divorce was my only option, and afterward, I would focus on being the best father I could be. As our conversation wrapped up, I heard my daughter Sarah squeal "Daddy," and rushed down the stairs. That woke up Davis, who joined us a few minutes later. I spent time hugging them, grateful to see them. They eventually noticed the scratches on my face, and I explained the accident. I told them their mom was in the hospital but would be fine, and that their grandparents would take them to see her when the time came. I left it at that. The rest of the day was spent playing with, talking to, holding, napping with, and laughing alongside my children. Those moments made me realize why I had to keep going. Up until then, I wasn't sure I wanted to, but they made me want to live, protect, and cherish them. Eleanor's phone was destroyed in the accident, so no one had heard from her in days. That night, I started receiving texts from her mother's phone, which I knew must have been from Eleanor. I ignored them, but they continued sporadically through the night, so I turned off notifications. The next day, I met with 3 law firms about filing for divorce. After meeting with 2, I felt a good connection with the second one, so I planned to meet with the third, highly rated lawyer, to see if they impress me more. If not, I'll go with the second firm's top divorce attorney. Either way, I'll have narrowed down her options, which feels like a win. Custody is my primary concern. I'm not seeking full custody, nor would I want it if I could get it. The kids need their mother in their lives, but after everything that's happened, she can never be part of mine again. We can arrange for a third party to handle drop-offs, ensuring the kids are where they need to be on time. There's no reason for me to ever interact with her again. I clearly never really knew her, so why continue to communicate with a stranger? 3 days ago, I received a call from Eleanor's mother. She was crying and asked if I would please come to the hospital because Eleanor was awake and asking for me. I told her I had no interest in seeing or speaking to Eleanor, then hung up. 10 minutes later, her father called. He said he understood my anger, but asked me to consider coming for just 5 minutes. He explained that Eleanor was distraught, and the doctors were concerned about her blood pressure and heart rate. I told him I would think about it, and hung up. An hour later, the hospital called. The doctor said Eleanor was having complications and kept asking for me. He suggested that my presence might help stabilize her condition. I reluctantly agreed to stop by for 5 minutes. When I arrived at the hospital, her parents were in the waiting room. They thanked me for coming and said the doctor would let me know when I could go in. After about 20 minutes, a nurse led me to Eleanor's room. She looked awful pale, thin, with dark circles under her eyes. Multiple tubes and wires were connected to her, and she was hooked up to various machines. When she saw me, she reached out her hand. I stayed by the door. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. I nodded but didn't say anything. "I'm so sorry," she continued. "I never meant to hurt you, yet here we are." I replied, "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. If it didn't mean anything, why did you do it?" She started crying. "I don't know. I was drunk. Vanessa kept saying I needed to have some fun before our trip. That stranger meant nothing to me. You're the only one I love." I cut her off. "Stop. Just stop. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. It's that simple. Please, can we talk about this when I'm better? Can we try to work things out for the kids?" She pleaded. "There's nothing to work out," I said. "I'm filing for divorce. I came because the doctor said you were having complications. Now that I've seen you're fine, I'm leaving. The kids need both of us." She cried harder. "The kids will have both of us, just not together. I'll arrange a schedule with your parents for you to see them when you're released, but I've already spoken to lawyers. This isn't up for discussion." Her monitors began beeping faster. A nurse entered and asked me to step into the hallway. I ran into the doctor who had called me. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know this must be difficult. Is she really having complications?" I asked. He hesitated before responding. "Her physical recovery is progressing normally, but her emotional state is affecting her vital signs. She becomes extremely agitated when discussing certain topics, like her infidelity." He looked uncomfortable. "I don't know the details of your situation, but whatever happened is causing her significant stress, which isn't ideal for her recovery." "I understand," I said. "I came as requested, but I won't be returning. Her parents can update me on her condition for arranging visits with our children. Otherwise, please don't contact me unless it's an emergency." He nodded, and I left. In the waiting room, I spoke with her parents. "I came as requested," I told them. "But this doesn't change anything. I'll arrange for the kids to visit her when the doctors say it's appropriate. In the meantime, I'd appreciate updates on her condition, but only regarding when she can see the children." Her mother started to speak, but her father put a hand on her arm. "We understand," he said, "and we appreciate you coming today." I nodded and left. On my drive home, I called the second law firm and scheduled an appointment for the next day. I decided not to waste time meeting with the third lawyer. I need to get things moving. The next morning, I dropped the kids off at school and met with Paula, the attorney who had impressed me during our initial consultation. She was direct, professional, and seemed genuinely concerned about my situation, particularly regarding the children. I explained everything that had happened since we last spoke, including my visit to the hospital. She took notes and then outlined the process ahead. "Given the circumstances, and assuming she doesn't contest, we can file for a no-fault divorce," Paula explained. "However, her infidelity gives us leverage if needed for custody. I recommend a joint arrangement as you suggested, with you as the primary residential parent. We'll need to work out a visitation schedule once she's released from the hospital. I want as little direct contact with her as possible," I said. "We can arrange for exchanges to happen at a neutral location or through a third party. Many divorced couples rely on family members or professional services for this purpose." We spent the next hour discussing financial details, division of assets, and potential child support arrangements. By the end, I felt more in control of the situation than I had since discovering Eleanor with that man. As I was leaving, Paula handed me her card with her cell phone number written on the back. "Call anytime if you have questions or concerns," she said, "and try to take care of yourself during this process. It's going to be difficult, especially with the children involved." I thanked her and headed home to prepare for picking up the kids from school. On the way, I received a text from Eleanor's father saying she would be released from the hospital in 3 days and would be staying with them during her recovery. He asked when the children could visit. I replied that I would bring them that weekend if the doctors approved. That weekend was difficult. I had to prepare Davis and Sarah to see their mother in her injured state without revealing the true nature of our marital breakdown. I told them that Mom and Dad had decided not to live together anymore, but reassured them that we both loved them very much, and that wouldn't change. Davis, being older, asked more questions. "Did you and Mom have a fight?" "It's complicated," I replied. "Sometimes adults realize they can't stay married even though they care about each other." "Is that why you don't want to visit Mom in the hospital?" I took a deep breath. "I want to give Mom time to focus on getting better, and I need some time to figure things out too." He seemed to accept this, though I could tell he wasn't entirely satisfied with my answers. Sarah was less inquisitive, but more emotional. She cried when I explained that Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be living in the same house anymore. I held her and promised everything would be okay. Even though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. When we arrived at Eleanor's parents' house on Saturday, her mother met us at the door. She hugged the children tightly, and then gave me a nod that seemed to convey both gratitude and disappointment. She led Davis and Sarah inside, while I waited in the car. After an hour, they came back out both subdued but not visibly upset. On the drive home, Davis told me their mom looked really hurt, but had promised she'd be better soon. Sarah said Grandma had made cookies and Grandpa had shown them a bird's nest in the backyard. Neither of them mentioned anything about the divorce or asked why I hadn't come inside. I was grateful for the reprieve, knowing harder conversations lay ahead. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat alone in the kitchen with a glass of water, staring at the divorce papers Paula had prepared. Tomorrow, I would file them, taking the first official step toward ending my marriage. Despite everything Eleanor had done, despite the rage and betrayal, I felt there was still a hollow feeling in my chest as I contemplated signing my name to those documents. 16 years together, 10 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, all of it damaged beyond repair by a single act of betrayal. Or perhaps by many acts I didn't yet know about. The thought made my stomach churn. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Vanessa. We need to talk. It's important." I deleted the message without responding and turned off my phone. Whatever she had to say, I wasn't interested in hearing it. She had enabled my wife's betrayal, maybe even encouraged it. She was as dead to me now as the marriage she had helped destroy. I managed to secure an excellent lawyer. Paula's firm is highly rated for representing men in divorce cases in my area. Instead of passing my case off to someone else, she took it on personally. Everyone at the firm has been supportive and professional, and I can tell they genuinely care about their clients beyond just collecting their fees. After agreeing to take my case, Paula and I went over the standard forms I needed to complete. I listed our property, bank account information, and estimates of what Eleanor and I earn. When I explained the accident and what happened just before it, Paula asked if I'd had an STD panel done. I told her I had, and everything came back clean. She then asked if I had documented the infidelity with pictures or video. I explained that I hadn't been thinking clearly enough at the moment to do that. Paula immediately called a private investigator her firm regularly uses and set up a meeting for the next day. I live in an at-fault state, so while I knew Eleanor had been unfaithful, I needed actual evidence for the divorce to proceed in my favor. One of Paula's staff members was assigned to handle communication between me and Eleanor's father for drop-offs and any other matters. I had her notify my father-in-law that the children could stay with Eleanor the upcoming weekend and the following week. Paula then asked if I had arranged therapy for myself and the children. I told her I had my first therapy appointment scheduled for that week, but since the children hadn't been told much beyond the basics, I was holding off on therapy for them. She advised me to let her know when I felt they needed professional help, as she could recommend several good therapists. She seemed genuinely sorry about what I was going through. I usually dislike lawyers, but Paula appears to have a soul. She gave me a list of things to collect and do before our next meeting. Many of her instructions matched the advice I received from commenters on my previous post. When she told me to pick up 2 DNA test kits from the drugstore, I didn't think much of it. I knew it was standard protocol in these situations. That night, I did the cheek swabs for myself and the children, sealed everything up, and mailed the kits. The next morning, after dropping the kids off at school, I returned to work. 2 days later, on Friday, the intermediary dropped the children off with their grandfather for the weekend. I went to work and was just returning from lunch when I received an email notification from my personal account. I saw that there were 2 emails from the lab, so I waited until I was back at my desk to view them. I opened the first email and clicked the link. The results confirmed that Davis is indeed my son. I opened the second email and clicked the link. I read it, then read it again. I started shaking my head in disbelief. I knew I needed to leave the office before I broke down completely. I managed to take screenshots of both results and email them to myself as photo files. I went to my car and completely broke down as the reality sank in. Sarah isn't my daughter. I can't even begin to describe the pain. It felt as if my soul had been ripped away. I didn't know who to call, so I just sat there crying, wishing this nightmare would end. I downloaded the files from my email and texted the images to Paula. Within seconds, she called and asked where I was. All I could manage to say was work. She told me to stay put, and that someone from the firm would be there shortly. I ended the call, opened my car door, and began vomiting uncontrollably until I was dry heaving. By the time I stopped and the dizziness faded, one of the paralegals arrived to pick me up. She drove me to the firm, and as soon as Paula finished with another client, they took me to her office. Paula immediately told me that sometimes tests come back with errors. She understood I was upset, but insisted we needed to retest Sarah and me at a local lab to ensure nothing was contaminated. I couldn't believe what was happening. Even after catching Eleanor cheating, I had assumed the DNA test was just a formality. I never thought she was capable of having another man's child and passing it off as mine. I couldn't confront Eleanor. Even if I wanted to, I didn't have concrete proof yet. But I couldn't imagine how we'd ever have that conversation if the results were confirmed. One of the staff members checked my blood pressure to make sure it wasn't dangerously high. It was elevated, and I felt close to a panic attack, but I was also numb from shock. I struggled to process that my little girl might not be mine biologically. I wondered if both test results could be wrong. Maybe Sarah was mine and Davis wasn't. I knew I couldn't wait 2 more days to know the truth. The intermediary arranged to pick Sarah up the next day for a few hours and return her to Eleanor's parents. We did the test at a proper medical facility with trained staff. There was no mix-up. I am not Sarah's father. The results took a day to come back, and she was back with her mother by the time I received them. But when I saw the results, I cried even harder the second time. I'm glad Sarah wasn't there to see it. I sent the results to Paula, who called to check on me. She urged me to seek out family and not go through this alone. I got in my car and drove to my parents' house, crying the entire way. When I arrived, my mother knew something was wrong, but couldn't get it out of me. Finally, I managed to say, "Sarah is not my daughter." Mom asked what, but she heard me correctly, and I couldn't repeat it. After about half a minute of silence, broken only by my uncontrollable weeping, she stood up, grabbed her cell phone, and called my dad. She told him to hurry home, but to be careful because I had bad news. My dad wanted to know what was wrong, but she just urged him to be safe and get home as soon as possible. He arrived about 20 minutes later, and we all cried together for hours. I'd console my dad, he'd console my mom, and they'd console me, but none of us could be consoled. They asked about Davis, and I assured them he was mine. They expressed relief, then quickly felt guilty for feeling relieved about only losing 1 grandchild instead of 2. They asked what I planned to do, and I told them I didn't know. The only certainty was that Sarah would never want for anything. She would have everything she needed and most of what she wanted. At that moment, I didn't care about potential child support. She was going to be taken care of. As awful as I felt for myself, I felt even worse for Sarah, who was completely innocent in all of this. I began to wonder, did I want custody of her? Could I even get custody if I wanted it? I also started questioning whether Eleanor knew or suspected the truth. I suddenly needed answers. I met with Paula after work on Monday. She told me that she'd met with the private investigator hired to follow Eleanor. Because of the accident, Eleanor hadn't left the house to cheat again, so there was no recent evidence. However, Paula had me bring Eleanor's old cell phone, which she'd found in a drawer at home. The investigator was able to access nearly every app, as if he were on her destroyed phone. He found nude photos exchanged with various men, along with countless explicit messages and enough admissions of guilt to sway any judge. They asked if I wanted to see any of the pictures or read the texts. I declined. Instead, Paula and I needed to plan how I would confront Eleanor about Sarah. Paula thought it would be best to do it in her office if Eleanor could be convinced to come. Paula called Eleanor's mother's cell phone in front of me. I heard Eleanor's voice for the first time since leaving the hospital. Paula got straight to the point, saying she needed Eleanor to meet with me to discuss some important matters. Eleanor said she'd been waiting to talk to me. Paula asked if she had a lawyer we should contact. Eleanor said she didn't have one, but was willing to come the next afternoon. The next day, I could barely focus at work. I left at 3 p.m. and headed to Paula's office, feeling nauseated. I arrived first, intentionally. I wanted Eleanor to walk in, sit on the side away from the door, and be unable to approach me. I was scrolling through photos of our family, a family that never truly existed. When she arrived, she needed assistance walking and still wore 2 casts from the accident. Once seated, she was offered water, and the meeting began. Paula asked Eleanor if she minded us recording the conversation. Eleanor agreed. As soon as we started recording, Eleanor tried to apologize. I interrupted her and asked point-blank how many men she had cheated on me with and when it started. The private investigator had found enough evidence to know that the man I caught her with wasn't the first by a long shot. She seemed confused, clearly not realizing what we knew. I asked again, this time for her to estimate how many men she had slept with since Davis was born. The specific time frame made her pause, but she continued to act clueless, still thinking she could play games. My patience was wearing thin. Paula gently put her hand on my shoulder and pushed me back from the table. She looked at Eleanor and asked if I was a good father. Eleanor quickly gave me a glowing review, saying she couldn't have asked for a better father to raise her children. I wanted to flip the table at the way she phrased it, her children. Paula then asked her if the other father of her child was going to be a good dad too. As Eleanor asked what other father Paula was referring to, my lawyer slid the paternity results for Sarah across the table. I needed to see Eleanor's reaction in person. She was visibly shocked. She tried to hit me with the "you're the father who raised her" line, but I shut that down and asked who Sarah's biological father was. She looked down, and I thought she might be protecting someone when she said she didn't know for sure who Sarah's father was. That was the moment I completely broke down. I couldn't take it anymore. Eleanor was crying, but still wanted to explain. She reminded me of the postpartum depression she had after Davis was born. I had been as supportive as I could, spending every moment I could with our son so she could have time to herself. There were days she was so depressed she couldn't even get out of bed, and I took care of everything. I thought it strengthened our relationship, but I had been foolish enough to believe that surviving that difficult time had made us stronger as a couple. Eleanor didn't directly blame Vanessa, but she explained that when Vanessa first got her to go out for a few girls' nights, I had been relieved and even grateful. They had been best friends for years, but hadn't spent much time together during Eleanor's pregnancy. She said she got extremely drunk on the second outing, let some guy feel her up, and performed a sex act on him. She claimed she felt guilty about it for months, but also began to resent not being able to be young and free, to be with whoever she wanted. Eleanor said she started hooking up with men during the nights out with Vanessa, right up until the night before the accident. She claimed she never stayed out all night or came home late, but over the years, she never wanted to develop feelings for any of the men. She said she always used protection and never slept with the same man more than 3 times. She said she just wanted sex. I was stunned. Finding out your wife has been unfaithful with multiple partners does something to a person. It's like learning your entire life was a reality show you didn't agree to participate in. I wanted to yell at her, but I was too busy calculating how many men she might have been with over the years. Paula asked if Eleanor had any idea who Sarah's father might be. Eleanor swore she always assumed Sarah was mine. Paula pointed out that something obviously happened, suggesting maybe a condom broke. When Eleanor confessed that it had happened a few times with different men, I lost control. I asked her who she was because I didn't recognize the person telling me such horrible things so casually. I asked when she started hating me and why. I asked what I had ever done to deserve being treated this way. How could she do this to Sarah? I raged while she sat there, knowing it was all true after everything she'd just revealed. Divorce was inevitable. What had once been a marriage was now a scorched earth. The only thing left was to count the casualties: wife, husband, daughter, half-brother. Then there were the grandparents and in-laws. Eleanor had essentially destroyed 2 entire families. Her parents would be devastated when they learned the full extent of what she had been doing, and I intended to make sure they saw all the evidence the investigator had found. Eleanor claimed she never meant to hurt me, swearing she had no idea Sarah wasn't mine. I actually believed her about that part one didn't know either. But DNA doesn't lie. I asked her why she didn't just divorce me if she was unhappy. She outright admitted that she didn't want to lose the security I provided. She cried throughout the conversation, but my expression remained one of pure disgust. I asked if she felt any shame. She claimed she did. I asked how we were going to find out who Sarah's father actually is. Eleanor started with some philosophical talk about how I was already Sarah's father. I wasn't in the mood for that. Whoever Sarah's biological father is deserves to know, and Sarah needs his family medical history. The evidence the investigator found didn't go back before Sarah was born. I asked Eleanor if she had saved any of these men's contact information. She had the audacity to say the point of deleting their numbers was to never see them again. I pointed out that she might have wanted to keep their numbers in case she needed to inform them about a pregnancy or an STD. I want my name removed from Sarah's birth certificate. DNA proves she's Eleanor's child, but not mine. I've committed to supporting Sarah financially, of my own free will, long past her turning 18. She will never want for anything. As for custody of Davis, I'm not sure what to do. Before the paternity test, I had strongly considered seeking a 90-10 arrangement, giving Eleanor custody 1 weekend per month and certain holidays. Now that I know Sarah isn't mine, I don't feel right pursuing custody of her, even if I could get it. Since Davis is her half-brother, I don't want to separate them completely. I don't want either child to suffer, but I haven't seen Sarah since receiving the test results, and I can't let her see me break down because of them. Both children will need therapy, and I'll gladly pay for it. There's no way to know if Sarah's real dad can afford it, and my own therapy bills will be substantial. On the drive home after the meeting, part of me wanted to end it all. It seemed like the easiest solution for everyone. Both families could continue pretending about Sarah's paternity. Eleanor could go on with her life, and the children wouldn't have to deal with a broken marriage or failed relationships. But by the time I got home, I rejected that thinking completely. Paula is preparing divorce papers and legal documents to have me declared not Sarah's father. That will make things take much longer, but I want no legal obligation to interact with or pay for a child who isn't mine, regardless of my personal commitment to Sarah. Paula's legal team is researching ways to find Sarah's biological father. Many ancestry sites suggest potential relatives when results come back. That's our first plan of action. Even if the results don't identify a specific individual, they might point to a brother, cousin, or another relative. Whoever the man is, he may not be ready to accept a child he didn't know about. It could cause significant disruption in his life, but I doubt it will be nearly as devastating as what I've experienced losing a daughter I thought was mine for 6 years. Everything is chaotic right now, and nothing feels stable. The children returned to the house Sunday afternoon. I've never dreaded seeing them before, but I know there are inevitabilities I can't prepare for. When Sarah sees me and wants a hug from her daddy, I'm not sure how I'll react. Will I hug her and cry because she's never truly been mine? Or will I tell her I'm not who she thinks I am? I don't have it in me to be cruel to her, but my heart is shattered. There's no one to direct this pain toward, not even Eleanor. Nothing I could do, short of extreme measures, would match the depth of her betrayal. That balance will never be achieved. She used me and discarded me, and she deserves severe consequences for her promiscuous, deceptive behavior. I know I'll win the divorce case. Paula and her team will ensure it's one of the most one-sided asset divisions in divorce history. But Eleanor has already taken so much from me that it feels like she's already won. 3 days ago, I received a call from Vanessa. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail asking me to call her, saying she needed to explain some things. I deleted it without listening to the entire message. I have no interest in anything she has to say. Last night, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a handwritten letter from Eleanor and a thumb drive. The letter began with another apology, then explained that the thumb drive contained text messages between her and Vanessa going back several years. She wrote that while it wouldn't excuse her behavior, it might help me understand how things unfolded. I haven't looked at the drive yet. I'm not sure I want to. This morning, Eleanor's sister called me. We've always gotten along well, and she asked if she could come over to talk. I agreed, mainly because I respect her and her husband, who have always seemed like decent people. She arrived around noon, and we sat on the back porch with coffee. She told me that Eleanor had finally confessed everything to her, including the fact that Sarah isn't mine. She was devastated and ashamed of her sister's behavior. She asked if I had plans to tell Sarah the truth. I explained that I was still processing everything myself and hadn't made any decisions about when or how to tell Sarah. I asked for her opinion as someone who knows and loves Sarah, but isn't as emotionally involved as I am. She thought for a moment, then suggested waiting until Sarah is old enough to understand the complexity of the situation. She pointed out that abruptly telling a 6-year-old that the only father she's ever known isn't her biological father could cause lasting psychological harm, especially coming so soon after her parents' separation. I agreed with her assessment, but mentioned my concern about Sarah potentially hearing it from someone else. Her sister assured me she wouldn't say anything and doubted Eleanor would either, given how ashamed she claimed to be. Before leaving, she handed me an envelope, saying, "Eleanor asked me to give you this." She said it contained access to a savings account Eleanor had kept for years and wanted me to use it for Sarah's future. I took the envelope but told her I had no intention of using Eleanor's money. Sarah would be well provided for without it. She nodded in understanding and left, after promising to stay in touch regarding the children. After she left, I opened the envelope. Inside was a bank statement showing an account with just over $47,000 and a note with the online banking credentials. I placed it in my home safe, unsure of what to do with it. Later that afternoon, I received a text from Paula. Just heard from her lawyer. She's hired Jensen and Associates. Good firm, but we're better. Meeting set for next Monday to discuss terms. So, Eleanor had finally retained counsel. I wondered where Eleanor had gotten the money, considering she wasn't working due to her injuries. Maybe her parents were helping her, though they had seemed firmly on my side when they first learned about her infidelity. Then again, they didn't yet know the full extent of her betrayal or about Sarah. I called Paula to discuss strategy, and we agreed that our position remained strong, especially with the evidence of infidelity and the paternity test results. She advised me not to mention anything about Sarah to Eleanor's parents yet, as it might complicate things if they suddenly rallied around their daughter out of concern for their grandchild's future. Let's get the divorce finalized first, Paula suggested. Then we can deal with the paternity issues separately. I agreed, though it felt dishonest not to tell them. But Paula reminded me that Eleanor had been dishonest with all of us for years, and we were simply being strategic. That evening, I received a call from the private investigator Paula had hired. He had been monitoring Eleanor's email and social media accounts and discovered something interesting. She had been in contact with a man named Timothy who lived in the same city. Based on the content of their messages, they had known each other for at least 7 years and had been intimate multiple times. The timing suggested he could potentially be Sarah's father. The investigator asked if I wanted him to approach Timothy discreetly. I told him to hold off until I discussed it with Paula. Things were moving faster than I had expected, and I needed time to think. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Sarah and how this would affect her. I remembered the day she was born, how I had held her tiny hand in mine and promised to protect her always. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike, reading her bedtime stories, wiping away her tears when she scraped her knee. For 6 years, I had been her father in every way that mattered. The fact that we didn't share DNA suddenly seemed both monumental and insignificant. I loved her. That hadn't changed when I saw the test results. What had changed was my understanding of the foundation. Our relationship was built on a foundation of lies and betrayal. The next morning, I called Paula and told her about the investigators' findings regarding Timothy. She suggested we meet to discuss our options. When I arrived at her office, she had already compiled information about him. Timothy Green, 36, divorced, no children, works as an architect, she said, handing me a folder. He's been living here for 8 years. No criminal record, good credit, owns his home. On paper, he seems like a decent person. Do we know if he was aware of Eleanor's marriage? I asked. The messages suggest he knew she was married, but believed your relationship was essentially over, that you were staying together for the kids, Paula said, shaking her head. A convenient lie, she told him, apparently. And is there any indication he knows about Sarah? None that we can find. Their communications never mentioned children directly. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process this information. So what do we do legally? We have several options, Paula explained. We can approach him directly. We can have Sarah's DNA compared to his if we can obtain a sample, or we can wait until after the divorce and pursue this through family court. What would you recommend from a legal standpoint? Waiting until after the divorce simplifies things. From a human standpoint, she paused. That depends on what you want for Sarah. Do you want to remain in her life as her father? Do you want Timothy to know and potentially get involved? What do you think would be best for her? Paula asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to continue being her father. I love her. But another part of me is so angry about being deceived that it's hard to separate those feelings. Paula nodded sympathetically. You don't have to decide everything today. Let's focus on the divorce first. But I would suggest considering therapy for yourself, specifically around this issue. It might help clarify your feelings. I agreed, leaving her office with more questions than answers. On the drive home, I passed Eleanor's parents' house and saw her father working in the yard. I made a spontaneous decision to stop. He seemed surprised to see me, but invited me in for coffee. I declined, saying I couldn't stay long. Standing in his driveway, I told him I had something important to discuss. I've received some news that affects all of us, especially Sarah, I began. I recently had DNA tests done, and the results show that I'm not Sarah's biological father. His face went pale. That can't be right. The tests must be wrong. I had them done twice at different labs. There's no mistake. He leaned against his car, visibly shaken. Does Eleanor know? Yes, we met with our lawyers yesterday. She admits she was with multiple men around the time Sarah was conceived. He put his head in his hands. I can't believe this. How could she do this to you? To Sarah? I don't know, but I wanted you to hear it from me before I tell your wife or anyone else. I'm still processing what it means for my relationship with Sarah going forward. He looked up at me, tears in his eyes. What are you going to do legally? I'm having my name removed from her birth certificate. But I've told Eleanor I'll continue to support Sarah financially and be in her life. I just don't know what that looks like yet. He nodded slowly. You're a better man than most would be in this situation. Whatever you decide, I hope we can still be part of Sarah's life and Davis's too, of course. I would never keep them from you, I assured him. You've been good grandparents, and none of this is your fault. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Wait, do you know who? We have a lead, but nothing confirmed yet. I'll let you know when we know more. He thanked me, and I got back in my car. As I drove away, I saw him still standing in the driveway, looking lost and broken. I knew exactly how he felt. When I got home, I found a message from my therapist confirming our appointment for the next day. I had a lot to discuss with her, particularly how to handle the upcoming weekend when the children would be back with me. I spent the rest of the day cleaning the house and preparing the children's rooms. I bought fresh groceries and made sure everything was ready for their return. Physical activity helped keep my mind occupied and prevented me from spiraling into dark thoughts. That night, I finally decided to look at the thumb drive Eleanor had sent. I plugged it into my laptop and found it contained hundreds of text messages between her and Vanessa, spanning several years. I started reading from the earliest messages, around the time Davis was born. The messages confirmed what Eleanor had told me about her postpartum depression and how Vanessa had encouraged her to go out, but they also revealed something more disturbing. Vanessa had actively encouraged Eleanor to cheat, describing it as liberating and empowering. She had introduced Eleanor to several of the men she eventually slept with, and at times, had even participated in group encounters. As I read through the messages, I felt myself becoming physically ill. The casual way they discussed their exploits, the code names they used for different men, the detailed descriptions of their actions, it was all too much. But I forced myself to keep reading, needing to understand the full extent of the betrayal. Around 2 a.m., I came across the messages from the period when Sarah would have been conceived. Eleanor had been with 4 different men in a 2-week span, including Timothy. There were joking references to a condom breaking with one of them, but she hadn't seemed concerned at the time. When she later discovered she was pregnant, she had initially panicked in messages to Vanessa, worried it might not be mine. But Vanessa had convinced her that the timing probably matched up with our own encounters, and even if it didn't, I would never know unless she told me. I closed the laptop, unable to read anymore. The depth of the deception was worse than I had imagined. This wasn't just Eleanor making a series of bad decisions. It was a deliberate, ongoing betrayal, enabled and encouraged by someone I had considered a friend of our family. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I hardly recognized the person staring back at me. In just a few weeks, I had aged years. The stress and shock had taken a physical toll. Tomorrow, I would see my therapist and try to make sense of everything I had learned. Then, I would prepare for the children's return on Sunday. Somehow, I had to find a way to be present for them, to be the father they needed, despite everything that had happened. I went back to my bedroom and picked up a framed family photo from the nightstand. It had been taken just 6 months ago, when we were all smiling, looking like the perfect family. Now, I knew it had all been an illusion, a house of cards built on Eleanor's lies. I placed the photo face down in a drawer. It was time to start building a new reality, one based on truth, no matter how painful that truth might be. The intermediary from Paula's law firm texted me at 3 p.m. on Sunday to let me know she had the children securely in the car with their belongings and was on her way to the house. I'd never dreaded a text message more. What made it particularly tragic was that, just weeks earlier, I would have smiled and anxiously awaited that same message. A reunion I once would have yearned for had now become something I feared. I had no plans to mention the divorce, paternity, or any issues with the children. Despite all my preparation, I knew I wasn't in the right state of mind to bring up any of that. My goal was to keep things as normal as possible, like the other times they stayed with their grandparents while Eleanor and I were on vacation. That's what I wanted, but I knew reality would be completely different, and I had little control over what might happen. Jessica, the intern from Paula's firm, pulled into the driveway. I watched from the front window as they arrived. I walked outside and down the steps as the car came to a stop. I was smiling as I approached the passenger side of Jessica's car, and as soon as I saw Sarah in her car seat, beaming a huge smile at me, I started crying. I was still smiling, though nothing could have knocked that smile off my face, but the tears just kept coming. I hoped that maintaining a smile might convince both the children and myself that everything was okay. As soon as I got Sarah out of her car seat, Davis was by my side, and I pulled them both into a tight hug. I told them I missed them. That was really all I could manage to say. I just kept crying. People could judge me all they wanted, but it felt different. It wasn't the same as the day I hugged my children goodbye before everything changed. Perhaps part of what I was feeling was grief over the destruction of our family unit. My heart broke seeing Sarah, knowing she wasn't biologically mine, and that realization crushed me all over again. That's what my life had become. Every day brought a new heartbreak. I was discovering more details about Eleanor's affairs, uncovering pain I couldn't shield the children from, and being reminded of past bonds that were all built on lies. Jessica helped me get the children inside, and I grabbed all their belongings while she closed the car doors and trunk. As soon as I set their bags down on the floor, I turned to see Sarah looking up at me. She didn't say anything, just looked at me with those eyes like she knew I was the one who needed comfort. I squatted down, and she walked into my arms, wrapping herself around me as tightly as she could. That child broke me completely. I wanted to be strong, but no child should ever witness an adult cry like that. Everyone keeps telling me to do what causes the least damage to the children, that it's logical. But what if everything causes damage? What if there's no way to prevent harm? Allowing Sarah to see me, someone who should be a source of strength and security, in such a state must be hurting her. How could it not? If I were to abandon her, it would destroy her. Yet, by staying in her life while carrying this burden, I'm hurting her too. A 6-year-old shouldn't have to console an adult, especially for something that isn't her fault. In that moment, I was filled with rage toward Eleanor. But this little girl who I was told was mine showed me love in the only way she knew how and kept hugging me. Then, I had a realization. Sarah and I are both victims. As the adult, I should be able to handle this better. She doesn't even know she's been victimized yet. Like survivors of a disaster, we need to support each other, though from very different perspectives. I'm experiencing the loss while trying to spare her as much pain as possible by taking it upon myself. I had been viewing this as Eleanor taking my daughter from me, but it's equally true that Eleanor took her father from her. The villain in this story is Eleanor. I refuse to feel guilty for my reactions. There's no handbook for discovering your child isn't biologically yours. Reddit offers great advice for handling infidelity and navigating divorce, but there's no clear guide for how to respond when you learn that the daughter you raised was never really yours. The only somewhat comparable situation would be children switched at birth, but in that case, a couple would face it together, having both been deceived. They would learn together that the child they raised isn't their biological child, unless you've experienced something similar. I couldn't explain how it felt, but after about 30 minutes, I managed to compose myself. Jessica left after receiving hugs from all three of us. I handed her a small envelope with $500 inside, telling her it was for gas. We both knew it wasn't really for gas. She drove an electric vehicle, but she accepted it graciously. I carried Sarah in my arms while Davis showed me some of the things he had made with his grandfather. Sarah kept her arms around my neck, making sure I knew she'd helped stain some of the wood. I played along with my usual "I don't believe you" routine, and Davis joined in. That turned into a tickle session, first for Sarah, then for Davis. It's hard to describe how both wonderful and heartbreaking it was to hear Sarah's squeals and laughter. Seeing Davis happy and laughing brought joy to my broken world, but I knew the future wouldn't offer much of what we were enjoying in that moment. They teamed up to wrestle me, and I appreciated seeing them work together even if it was against me. Father or not, I thought, by the time Sarah's old enough to date, I'll have taught her to firmly say no when necessary. I put on some music. Ever since she was a baby, Sarah has loved music. I've danced with her from the first week she was born until last month. I'm sure I look ridiculous, but I don't care. I have fun, and she loves acting as silly as I do. I ordered takeout for dinner. We're not Asian, but we sure eat like it. Davis can devour an impressive amount of lo mein for a 10-year-old. For some reason, Sarah loves crab rangoon. I didn't eat much. My appetite has completely disappeared since everything started. I just enjoyed having dinner with them again. They both had school the next day, so I got them bathed and ready for bed. Davis likes to read before falling asleep. I gave him a hug, told him I loved him, and said I'd see him in the morning. I tucked Sarah into bed and read her a storybook, pointing out details in the illustrations. She was nearly asleep when I felt tears welling up again. I kissed Sarah on her head and whispered, "I love you." For the first time since learning the truth, saying those words felt like I was acknowledging the reality of everything. People can call me whatever names they want, but those words were like allowing myself to face what had happened. My love for Sarah is real. I love her, but I do feel differently now, and maybe that's wrong, but I can't deny it. I've gone from not wanting to take anything away from her to wanting to give her everything I can. It's a significant shift in perspective. I waited for Sarah to say she loved me too, but instead, she mentioned that mommy loves me. When I gently questioned why she said that, she revealed that Eleanor had told her to say it. Through further questioning, with Davis joining in, I learned that Eleanor had told the children she wouldn't be coming home because I didn't love her anymore. The manipulation infuriated me. I called our regular babysitter and arranged for her to watch the children for a few hours since they were already in bed and she could study while getting paid. She agreed, and I drove straight to my in-laws' house without calling first. Upon arrival, I requested to see Eleanor and was led to her childhood bedroom, where she was recuperating. I asked for privacy, and her mother quickly left, sensing my anger. Once alone with Eleanor, I confronted her about blaming our split on my inability to love her. She defended her statement by claiming it was technically true, which only fueled my anger further. I pointed out that the reason I could never love her again was because of her deceptive and promiscuous behavior. She tried to deflect blame by mentioning her previous apologies, but I dismissed them as meaningless. I exploded, questioning what good an apology could possibly do when it couldn't undo or prevent the damage she caused. I expressed doubt about her genuine remorse and demanded to know how she could manipulate innocent children to make me appear as the villain if she truly felt any guilt. When I asked when I became the bad guy who destroyed our marriage, she immediately cited my refusal to give her another chance. Her response was so outrageous that I began to wonder about her medication and alcohol consumption. I no longer recognized the woman in front of me. It was as if a stranger had taken over her body. I asked if she felt justified in destroying everything for sexual gratification. She insisted it wasn't just about sex and explained that much of it, especially initially, was about validation and enjoying being pursued. Our conversation lasted for hours. She acknowledged that, during her depression after Davis's birth, I had been extraordinarily supportive, which made me question why she had betrayed me so cruelly. She described feeling anxious to the point of suicidal thoughts despite the joy of motherhood. She loved Davis and me, but simultaneously felt overwhelmed by depression and emptiness. Her extended leave from work due to her condition led to additional guilt as I took on the responsibility of supporting the family financially and emotionally. She felt like she wasn't bearing the actual burden of family responsibilities and began questioning her decision to become a mother, despite always wanting children. During this time, she withdrew from friends, both in person and online. Eleanor recalled Vanessa's unexpected visit during this difficult period. I had been relieved to see Vanessa, knowing she was assertive enough to engage Eleanor, but kind enough to encourage her to open up. It took months before anything resembling a night out occurred. Initially, just getting Eleanor to visit a coffee shop had been considered progress. In retrospect, I recognized that many people would consider me foolish for allowing my wife to frequent bars with a single friend. Under normal circumstances, they would have been right, and I should have ended that arrangement much sooner. However, after months of sadness and isolation, seeing Eleanor happy even after just one outing seemed like an improvement. She attempted to explain that she had quickly transitioned into both a wife and mother in a short period. The attention from men, even if purely sexual, boosted her self-esteem. She claimed that her first infidelity wouldn't have happened if she hadn't been extremely intoxicated, though she admitted it was consensual. After crossing that line, she knew I would never touch her again if I found out, and that she would lose everything, as she had entered our marriage with nothing. When I asked if she had ever anticipated me discovering her infidelity or considered how I might react, she admitted that she knew it would devastate me and claimed to feel terrible about it. This led to my obvious question: why continue the behavior? She described feeling guilt, shame, and regret immediately after each encounter once sober. I remembered her noticeable sadness for a week after her first night out. Vanessa had visited, and they had talked privately for hours. Eleanor's demeanor had improved dramatically after that conversation. She revealed that, on that day, she confided in Vanessa about feeling unworthy of me because of her actions, and she understood that if I ever discovered the truth, it would end our marriage and likely result in me gaining custody of Davis. She claimed that she had decided to take the secret to her grave and try to be the best possible wife as compensation. In hindsight, this should have raised red flags, but at the time, we had an infant to care for, and I was handling 95% of the parenting responsibilities. My wife seemed to be restored to her former self, and at the time, this felt like a miraculous recovery rather than something suspicious. Within weeks, I returned to work part-time and then full-time, while Eleanor functioned well as a stay-at-home mother. Looking back, the period around Davis's first birthday was one of our happiest, at least from my perspective. Learning that those times were happy because she was attempting to make up for betraying me completely changed how I viewed those memories. I questioned why she cheated again if I wasn't satisfying her needs. We had always maintained a healthy physical relationship outside of her depressive periods, and she had always seemed to enjoy our intimacy. She explained that the longer she kept the secret, the worse she felt about herself. Unlike after Davis's birth, she couldn't express her feelings to me. She knew I would want to comfort her and inquire about her sadness, but she couldn't reveal the truth. She mentioned that during the time I went to a family reunion out of state with Davis, she had canceled at the last minute, claiming illness. While I couldn't have prevented her infidelity at that point, I might have prevented her from conceiving a child that would deceive me for 6 years. I'm not blaming myself. She should have joined us on that trip, and better yet, she should have confessed her infidelity and allowed me to move on. Instead, she described experiencing severe depression that weekend while I was gone. She felt unworthy despite my ignorance of her actions, and in punishing herself, she convinced herself she deserved it. She realized that if I ever learned the truth, I would view her with disgust, and despite my constant expressions of love, she came to believe that her actions would eventually make my affection meaningless. She explained that she had called Vanessa for emotional support, who persuaded her to go out for drinks. According to Eleanor, she spent the first part of the evening crying and seeking advice. After several complimentary drinks from the bartender, she found herself kissing a man behind the bar, but stopped herself. She returned inside, feeling worse than before, only to end up cheating later on when Vanessa needed help getting Eleanor home. She asked the same man who had kissed her to assist, and once left alone with him, intimacy occurred. When I asked if she ever considered Davis or me during these encounters, she became defensive and insisted she never betrayed her son. I told her that she had betrayed not just me and Davis, but also Sarah, our parents, and everyone who had witnessed our vows and the sanctity of our marriage. I shook my head in disbelief, telling her that, despite her actions, she should have simply let me go. I would have cared for Davis, and she could have pursued whoever she wanted after the divorce. Instead, she continued to lie and cheat, and much of her story disgusted me. She had developed a strategy after the first few men she avoided letting them get attached to her, since she had no intention of leaving me unless forced. She wasn't looking for emotional connection. She called this method fishing, obtaining a man's number, showing interest, withdrawing, and encouraging pursuit on her terms. When she claimed she already knew I found her attractive and that seeking other opinions didn't feel wrong initially, I just stared at her in disbelief. Notably, the bartender is definitely not Sarah's biological father. His involvement occurred months too early, and Eleanor maintains they only had one encounter. When I asked if she could recall the names of specific men during the relevant period, she was hesitant. She claimed to remember only a few first names, without knowing how to contact them, which effectively ended our conversation for the night. I wanted more details, but I understood I wouldn't get all the answers in one session. That, however, wasn't my primary reason for visiting her. With Eleanor seated in a chair, her cast elevated on pillows, I positioned myself just inches from her face and described her as a pitiful, soulless human being. I told her that her actions had caused immeasurable pain that would continue to ripple through our lives. Looking directly into her eyes, I vowed not to let her hurt our children any further. I stressed that, as the one deceived for 6 years, I deserved the space to focus on my own needs. I warned her that petty tactics and manipulation would only deepen my contempt. Reconciliation was off the table. Her touch disgusted me, and loyalty was clearly something she didn't understand. However, I made it clear that, despite everything, I would remain loyal to Sarah. I would protect her at all costs, even if it meant shielding her from her mother's lies and manipulations. I told Eleanor that Paula had colleagues who could help her have Eleanor declared an unfit mother, and I meant every word of that threat. I insisted that any communication go through me, not through the children. Using them as messengers wouldn't be tolerated. I emphasized that Sarah should remain unaware of the divorce and paternity issues for now. Eventually, when the time came to explain, I would do so myself. I would tell her the truth, that her mother had victimized both of us, but that we had survived together. I refused to let the person who had destroyed so much minimize the damage or shift the blame. This conversation wouldn't happen anytime soon if I could help it, and I would determine the right moment to discuss it. I pointed out that she lacked legal representation and told her that the children would stay with me for at least 2 weeks. She needed time to reflect on her betrayal and the cruel manipulation that would hurt Sarah in the long run. She had few options to challenge this arrangement. I had custody, and she was physically restricted by her casts, which would give her a taste of the isolation she deserved. I've made many mistakes in my life, and during the drive home, I repeatedly wished I had known these outcomes in advance. This is my greatest current challenge, and I hope it remains the most significant one I ever face. The destruction is overwhelming. The fraudulent marriage I endured needs to be fully dismantled. However, there's no reason to hurt a young girl who is currently unaware of the conflict between her mother and the man she calls daddy. I want to preserve her innocence for as long as possible. The children cannot witness us together. When Eleanor and I are in the same space, the atmosphere becomes toxic. I refuse to expose them to that negativity. I won't engage in conflict with her in front of them, but I will immediately address any attempts at manipulation. This update has been extensive, and I apologize, but every decision seems to have endless consequences. Those who argue that DNA doesn't matter need to understand that hurting Sarah is the last thing I want. I will continue to support and advocate for her well-being. The ultimate resolution remains uncertain, but what is clear is that Sarah and I have both suffered betrayal by the same person. I refuse to allow Eleanor to damage Sarah as she damaged me. That outcome is unacceptable. No one will approach my daughter without my approval, a decision Eleanor won't control. After evaluating someone's background and meeting them personally, I will make that call when the time is right. For now, Davis, Sarah, and I are navigating this crisis together. I've managed to protect them from the impending consequences so far, and will continue to shield them from as much fallout as possible. But we will all experience pain before this is over. This devastation could have been prevented, but once the explosion happens, the damage is irreversible. I've been attending therapy twice a week now. While I'm uncertain about its effectiveness, I'm still early in the process and plan to continue for at least a few more sessions. 3 days after my confrontation with Eleanor, her father contacted me, asking for a meeting. We arranged to meet the next morning at a small cafe downtown. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated posture. He began by apologizing for his daughter's behavior, saying they had raised her better and wondering where they had gone wrong as parents. I reassured him that they weren't responsible, as Eleanor had made her own choices. He nodded slowly, explaining that they had been talking everything through, trying to make sense of the situation. He then revealed that Eleanor had confessed the truth about Sarah. I tensed and asked what exactly she had told them. He confirmed that she admitted Sarah wasn't biologically mine and that she didn't know the identity of the father. He seemed visibly shaken, expressing disbelief and wondering how she could do this to both Sarah and me. I told him that no one could truly understand my feelings. When he asked about my plans regarding Sarah, I explained that I was legally removing my name from her birth certificate, but I would continue to support her and maintain a relationship with her, though the specifics were still uncertain. He reached across the table, briefly touching my hand, and called me a good man, better than most would be in this situation. He expressed support for whatever decision I made. He then brought up another subject. He and his wife had been discussing Eleanor's need for professional help beyond physical therapy for her injuries. They believed she needed serious psychological intervention. I agreed with his assessment. He mentioned finding a residential treatment facility specializing in depression, addiction, and trauma. They believed it would be beneficial for everyone if she spent time there. When I asked if she would agree to this, he said they weren't giving her a choice, since she was living in their home and using their resources. She would either get the necessary help or find somewhere else to stay. I asked about the timeline, and he explained they planned to admit her immediately after her casts were removed the following week. The initial program lasted 60 days, with the option for an extension if needed. Regarding visitation with the children, he mentioned that the facility allowed family visits after 30 days, depending on the patient's progress. He understood if I wasn't comfortable with this arrangement and suggested they could potentially bring the children to see her instead. I proposed evaluating the situation after 30 days and consulting with my lawyer. He agreed, and we finished our coffee in relative silence. As we were about to leave, he paused to express their love for the children and continued to consider me as part of the family, saying their feelings hadn't changed. I thanked him, unexpectedly moved by his words. On the drive home, I called Paula to update her on the developments. She saw Eleanor's admission to the treatment facility as potentially beneficial for both the divorce proceedings and future custody arrangements. She pointed out that acknowledging her need for help showed self-awareness and a desire to improve, which the court would view positively. It also established her need for professional intervention, creating a situation that could work in both Eleanor's and our case, while giving me time to decide on next steps regarding Sarah. That evening, I explained to Davis and Sarah that their mother would be entering a specialized hospital to continue her recovery. I framed it as an extension of her accident treatment, emphasizing that doctors would be helping with both her physical and mental healing. Davis asked about visiting, and I confirmed that they would be allowed to visit after her initial treatment period. Sarah surprised me by asking if this was related to her mother's ongoing sadness. When I asked what made her think that, she described hearing her mother cry frequently, even before the accident, sometimes behind bathroom doors when she thought no one could hear. I held Sarah and confirmed that the treatment would partially address her mother's sadness. The doctors would address that aspect of her condition. Davis asked if I would accompany them on visits, and I hesitated before explaining that I probably wouldn't, suggesting their grandparents might take them instead. When he asked if this was due to my continued anger toward her, I acknowledged the complexity of the situation while emphasizing my commitment to everyone's best interests. Though he nodded, I could tell he didn't fully understand. How could he, when I barely understood the situation myself? Later that night, after the children were asleep, Vanessa called unexpectedly. I almost ignored it, but answered out of curiosity. I greeted her coldly, and she immediately asked for a meeting, claiming she had important information to share. When I mentioned reviewing her text exchanges with Eleanor and knowing enough about her role in encouraging the affairs and introducing men, she asked how much I had actually seen. I told her I had seen enough to understand her involvement in the deception. As I was about to end the call, she quickly mentioned having information about Sarah, specifically claiming to know the identity of her biological father. This revelation stopped me from hanging up. When I pressed for more details, she refused to discuss it over the phone and insisted on meeting the next day. I agreed to meet at a public park the following afternoon. I immediately contacted Paula to inform her about the call, and she suggested having the private investigator attend discreetly to record our conversation. I welcomed this professional support. The next day, I arrived early at the park and noticed the investigator positioned nearby with a newspaper. Vanessa arrived on time, looking noticeably thinner and less confident than before. After brief greetings, she revealed that Sarah's father was her brother, Timothy. I stared at her in shock. The investigator had previously identified a man named Timothy as a potential father based on email communications, but I hadn't connected this to Vanessa's brother. I confirmed this was the same brother who had moved to the area about 8 years ago, and she acknowledged this. She explained she had suspected it for some time, but only received confirmation recently when Eleanor confessed after the accident while briefly staying at her residence. This new information was a lot to process. I questioned how she could have facilitated a relationship between her brother and my wife. She said the situation had been different in the beginning from what it eventually became. She described Timothy meeting Eleanor at her birthday celebration about 7 years ago, during Eleanor's severe postpartum depression. According to Vanessa, Eleanor had felt a connection with him she hadn't felt in a while. When I expressed disbelief at her encouraging such behavior in a married woman, she admitted she had been completely wrong. She claimed that once the relationship started, she couldn't stop it, and Eleanor subsequently began seeing other men, escalating the situation beyond control. I asked her why she was disclosing this now. She said, "Timothy deserves to know about his daughter, and Sarah deserves to know about her biological father." She handed me an envelope containing Timothy's contact information and a recent photograph, confirming that he was still unaware of Sarah's existence, as Eleanor had never told him about the pregnancy. I took the envelope without opening it, and asked if Timothy knew about her revelation. She admitted that he didn't and feared his potential unforgiveness for years of concealment. I sympathized with his position and confirmed that he still lived in the area. She described him as an unmarried architect with his own firm downtown and no known children. As I prepared to leave, I told her I would consider how to proceed with the information, emphasizing that this meeting didn't equate to forgiveness. She had contributed to my family's destruction. She quietly acknowledged this and expressed lifelong regret for her actions. Walking away, I exchanged a subtle glance with the investigator, who confirmed that everything had been recorded. I headed straight to Paula's office, the envelope growing increasingly significant. Paula listened attentively as I recounted the meeting and then called in the investigator, who had arrived shortly after me. He verified everything and provided the conversation recording. Paula took a moment to process the revelation about Timothy Green being Sarah's biological father and Vanessa's brother. When I asked how to proceed with this information, she explained that it depended on my objectives. Legally, we could approach Timothy, inform him of the situation, request DNA verification, and if confirmed, he would have certain rights and responsibilities regarding Sarah. When I questioned the alternative of keeping him uninvolved, she noted the added complexity, as I was removing my name from the birth certificate. Someone needed legal recognition as her father, otherwise, Sarah would be considered a child with only one parent. Feeling overwhelmed by these considerations, I expressed difficulty processing everything immediately. Paula reassured me that immediate decisions weren't necessary. She suggested taking time to reflect, consulting my therapist, and considering Sarah's long-term best interests. I thanked both professionals and left the office. During the drive home, Timothy occupied my thoughts. This man, whose DNA Sarah carried, might have rights to her life and could potentially separate her from me. Upon arriving home, the babysitter informed me that Sarah had been repeatedly asking about her mother throughout the afternoon. Something had triggered thoughts of Eleanor, causing Sarah increasing distress. When the sitter couldn't provide satisfactory answers, I found Sarah in her room, drawing with intense concentration. Upon seeing me, she abandoned her activity and ran to me for an embrace. Kneeling to her level, I asked about her concerns. She simply expressed missing her mother. I held her close while my heart broke again when she asked why her mother couldn't return home and whether it was due to misbehavior. I hesitated before explaining the complexity of the situation, describing how Eleanor had made choices that damaged our family and now required specialized assistance to recover. Sarah showed perceptiveness by asking if her mother had hurt me, causing my persistent sadness. I acknowledged this while emphasizing that it remained between adults and didn't affect how much we both loved her. When she asked if my sadness would eventually end, I honestly expressed hope for improvement, noting that she and Davis helped considerably. This seemed to satisfy her, and she returned to her artwork. I briefly observed her, noting how she extended her tongue slightly while concentrating an identical habit of mine. This mannerism, something she had acquired from me, not genetics, reminded me that nurture sometimes outweighs nature. That night, after the children were asleep, I examined the envelope Vanessa had provided. Inside, I found a business card for Green Architectural Design with contact information and a recent photograph showing a confident man in his mid-30s with dark hair. I studied his features, searching for resemblances to Sarah, noting similarities in nose structure and possibly eye shape. I returned everything to the envelope and placed it in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. For now, Sarah remained my daughter in all meaningful ways. The following morning, Eleanor's mother called, sounding exhausted but composed. She informed me they were taking Eleanor to the treatment facility that day with her voluntary agreement. I acknowledged this positively, uncertain of what else to say. She then mentioned that Eleanor had requested to see the children briefly before departure to say goodbye. I considered refusing, but reflected on how the children might feel later if I denied them this opportunity. I asked about timing, and she suggested noon if convenient. I agreed to bring them to their house at 12:30 for a 15-minute visit, after which I would take them to lunch. She expressed sincere gratitude, noting the significance of this moment for both Eleanor and her parents. After ending the call, I checked the time just after 9 a.m. With the children at school until 3 p.m., I had several hours to prepare mentally for this encounter. I contacted Paula to inform her of the arrangements. Paula advised maintaining calm detachment during the visit and avoiding private conversations with Eleanor. At 12:15 p.m., I picked up the children from school and explained that they were going to see their mother briefly before she went to a special hospital to get better. Davis seemed to grasp the seriousness of the situation, while Sarah was simply excited to see her mom. I reminded them that we would stay for only 15 minutes and then head to their favorite burger place for lunch. They both agreed, though Davis asked if their mother would be okay. I reassured him that the doctors would take good care of her. When we arrived at my in-laws' house, Eleanor's father met us at the door. He looked tired but managed to smile for the children and quietly thanked me as they rushed past him into the house. I stayed on the porch, signaling that I had no intention of coming inside. He nodded in understanding and left the door open so I could see into the living room. Eleanor was seated on the couch, her casts making movement difficult. When the children saw her, they ran to her, careful not to bump her injuries. She embraced them with her good arm, tears streaming down her face. From my position on the porch, I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Sarah climbing onto the couch beside her mother, while Davis stood nearby, asking questions. Judging by his gestures, Eleanor's mother approached me with a cup of coffee, which I declined. She stood beside me, watching the scene, occasionally wiping tears from her eyes. She commented on how difficult this was for everyone, especially the children. I remained silent, checking my watch repeatedly. Eventually, she asked if I thought I could ever forgive Eleanor. I responded that forgiveness wasn't relevant anymore. This was simply about ensuring the children's well-being moving forward. After exactly 15 minutes, I stepped into the doorway and called to the children. Eleanor looked up at me, her eyes pleading for more time. I remained firm, reminding the children about our lunch plans. Sarah clung to her mother, not wanting to leave. Davis, sensing the tension, gently pulled his sister away, whispering something in her ear that made her nod reluctantly. Eleanor hugged them both once more, telling them she loved them and would see them soon. She was visibly trying to hold herself together for their sake. As the children walked toward me, she called out, asking if she could speak with me privately for just a minute. I shook my head, took the children's hands, and led them to the car. On the drive to the restaurant, Sarah asked why I wouldn't talk to Mommy. I explained as gently as possible that Mommy and I had adult problems that made it hard for us to talk right now. Davis, with the awareness of a child who understands more than he should, told Sarah that sometimes grown-ups need time apart when they're angry with each other. I caught his eye in the rearview mirror and nodded slightly in gratitude. The lunch helped distract the children from the emotional visit. We talked about school, their friends, and plans for the weekend. By the time we finished the meal, Sarah was laughing again, and Davis seemed more relaxed. I dropped them back at school for their afternoon classes, promising to pick them up at the regular time. I drove directly to Paula's office afterward. She had received a call from Eleanor's lawyer requesting a meeting to discuss temporary custody arrangements while Eleanor was in treatment. Paula advised agreeing to the meeting, suggesting it would show that Eleanor was taking the situation seriously. We scheduled it for the following day. That evening, I received a text from Eleanor's father informing me they had successfully checked her into the treatment facility. The doctors had evaluated Eleanor's condition and adjusted her medication. They anticipated removing her casts the following week, which would allow her to fully participate in the program. He thanked me for bringing the children to see her and asked if they could visit her parents this weekend. I agreed, appreciating their effort to maintain some normalcy for the kids despite the circumstances. The next day, Paula and I met with Eleanor's lawyer, a middle-aged man named Robert Wilson. He seemed competent and straightforward, presenting documents outlining Eleanor's treatment plan and a proposed visitation schedule for when she completed the first 30 days. The schedule included supervised visits at the facility, gradually transitioning to unsupervised weekend visits at her parents' home after 3 months, assuming her treatment progressed well. Paula questioned several points in the proposal, particularly the timeline for unsupervised visits. She emphasized my concerns about Eleanor's mental stability and decision-making. Robert acknowledged these concerns, but noted that Eleanor's voluntary entry into treatment demonstrated her commitment to improvement. Throughout the meeting, I remained mostly silent, letting Paula handle the negotiations. When Robert directly asked about my willingness to facilitate a relationship between the children and their mother, I stated clearly that while I wouldn't prevent them from seeing her, I had serious reservations about her ability to be a responsible parent, given her past behavior. I added that we hadn't yet addressed the issue of Sarah's paternity, which would necessarily impact any long-term custody arrangements. Robert appeared surprised by this statement, looking down at his notes with a frown. It became clear that Eleanor hadn't fully informed him about the paternity issue. Paula took the opportunity to present the DNA test results, explaining that I was in the process of legally removing my name from Sarah's birth certificate. The meeting ended with an agreement to the supervised visits after 30 days, with all other matters to be determined based on Eleanor's progress in treatment and further legal discussions regarding Sarah's situation. Robert requested copies of all paternity-related documentation, which Paula provided before we left. On the drive back to my office, Paula commented on Robert's apparent surprise regarding Sarah's paternity. She suspected Eleanor might be hiding information from her own lawyer, which could complicate matters. She advised me to prepare for potential resistance once Robert reviewed the DNA results and consulted with Eleanor. The following week passed relatively quietly. The children settled into a routine, alternating between staying with me and visiting their grandparents on the weekend. Davis asked about his mother occasionally, but seemed satisfied when I told him she was working hard in her program and would be able to receive visitors in a few weeks. Sarah mentioned her less frequently, becoming more focused on school activities and her upcoming dance recital. My therapy sessions continued twice weekly. During one particularly difficult session, my therapist suggested I consider meeting with Timothy Green to discuss the situation. She pointed out that avoiding the issue wouldn't make it disappear, and having a plan for addressing Sarah's paternity might help me feel more in control of the situation. I admitted the thought of meeting him terrified me, not because of who he was, but because of what he represented the potential of losing Sarah. After careful consideration and discussions with both my therapist and Paula, I decided to contact Timothy. Paula suggested approaching him through a formal letter from her office rather than calling or showing up in person. This would provide documentation of the contact and give him time to process the information before responding. The letter was carefully crafted, explaining the discovery of Sarah's paternity without assigning blame or delving into unnecessary details about Eleanor's behavior. It requested a meeting to discuss the situation and included contact information for both Paula and me. We sent the letter via certified mail to ensure delivery. 3 days later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Timothy. His voice was steady, though tense, as he introduced himself and requested a meeting as soon as possible, preferably somewhere private. We agreed to meet the following afternoon at Paula's office. When I arrived for the meeting, Paula greeted me in the reception area. She had arranged for a conference room with comfortable seating and refreshments available. She reminded me to stay calm, regardless of Timothy's reaction, and to focus on Sarah's well-being rather than dwelling on past events. Timothy arrived right on time. He was taller than he appeared in the photograph, dressed in a suit that suggested professional success. The resemblance to Sarah was immediately noticeable: his nose, similar eye shape, and a certain way of carrying himself that I had always thought came from Eleanor's side of the family. Paula made the introductions and outlined the purpose of the meeting. Timothy listened attentively, his expression revealing little. When she finished, he asked several practical questions about the DNA testing, the legal process for establishing paternity, and Sarah's current situation. His composure was remarkable given the circumstances. When Timothy finally addressed me directly, he asked about Sarah, her personality, her interests, and her health history. I found myself talking at length about her love for dancing, her stubborn streak, and her infectious laugh. As I spoke, I watched his face carefully, noting the mix of wonder and regret. Eventually, he asked if I had told Sarah about him. When I explained that she didn't yet know anything about the situation, he nodded in understanding. He stated clearly that while he wanted to know his daughter, he had no desire to disrupt her life unnecessarily. He recognized that I had been her father in every way that mattered for the past 6 years. The conversation shifted to more difficult topics when Timothy brought up Eleanor. He confirmed having had a relationship with her years ago, but claimed he had no idea she was pregnant. He described their relationship as brief but intense, ending when Eleanor suddenly cut off contact without explanation. He had tried to reach her a few times afterward, but eventually moved on. He expressed shock at learning she had been married the entire time, claiming she told him she was separated and finalizing a divorce. Paula intervened when the conversation began to focus too much on Eleanor's deceptions. She redirected the discussion to the immediate concerns: establishing legal paternity, determining how and when to tell Sarah, and developing a plan for introducing Timothy into her life gradually, if that was agreed upon by everyone. After nearly 2 hours of discussion, we reached a tentative agreement. Timothy would submit to an official DNA test to legally establish paternity. If confirmed, he would begin meeting Sarah in controlled settings, initially introduced as a family friend. We would consult child psychologists to determine the best timeline and approach for revealing the truth to her. Throughout this process, I would remain Sarah's primary caregiver, with Timothy gradually increasing his involvement based on professional recommendations and Sarah's comfort level. We would revisit the arrangement regularly, adjusting it as needed based on Sarah's responses. Before leaving, Timothy thanked me for meeting with him and for taking such good care of Sarah. He acknowledged the unusual and painful circumstances and expressed genuine respect for my position. He provided his direct contact information and asked if I could share a recent photo of Sarah. I scrolled through my phone and showed him several. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at his daughter's face for the first time. The meeting ended on a cautiously positive note. Afterward, Paula remarked that Timothy seemed reasonable and genuinely concerned about Sarah's welfare. She cautioned that emotions might change once he actually met Sarah and developed a relationship with her, but for now, his approach seemed measured and thoughtful. That evening, I sat with the children during dinner, watching Sarah excitedly talk about her day at school. I tried to find traces of Timothy in Sarah's features, the way she held herself, her mannerisms, her expressions. It was there, if you knew where to look. But so much of who she was had little to do with genetics. Her humor, her kindness, her resilience, those qualities had grown from our relationship and the experiences we'd shared together. The following week, another development arose. Paula received a call from Robert Wilson requesting an urgent meeting. When we arrived at his office, he informed us that Eleanor had been evaluated by the psychiatric team at the treatment facility and diagnosed with a personality disorder that required more intensive therapy than initially planned. The doctors recommended extending her stay to at least 90 days, followed by a structured outpatient program. Robert explained that Eleanor had initially resisted this recommendation, but had eventually agreed after discussions with her parents. He provided documentation from her doctors detailing the diagnosis and treatment plan. The paperwork didn't specify the exact nature of the disorder due to patient confidentiality, but it noted that it affected Eleanor's decision-making, impulse control, and relationships. This news wasn't entirely surprising, considering Eleanor's behavior, but hearing it confirmed clinically made the situation feel more real. Paula requested copies of all medical documentation that could be legally shared, noting its relevance to our ongoing custody discussions. Before we left, Robert mentioned that Eleanor had been informed about the paternity test results and the contact with Timothy. Her reaction had been volatile enough to require sedation, which her doctors saw as further evidence of her condition. He assured us that she was now stable and continuing with her treatment. 2 days later, I received an unexpected visit from Eleanor's sister, Kate. We had always gotten along well, though we weren't particularly close. She appeared at my door, looking nervous and clutching a small package. After some hesitation, she explained that while helping her parents clean out Eleanor's apartment, she had found something she thought might be relevant to the situation, particularly regarding Sarah's conception. The package contained a journal Eleanor had kept during the early years of our marriage. Kate had read enough to realize the journal contained information I needed to know and decided I deserved to have it. I thanked her for bringing it and invited her in for coffee. As we sat in the kitchen, she asked about the children and how they were coping. She offered to help in any way she could, acknowledging the awkward position of wanting to support both her sister and me. Before leaving, she hugged me tightly and whispered that she was sorry for everything Eleanor had done. After she left, I placed the journal on my desk without opening it. Part of me wanted to read it immediately, to uncover answers to the questions that had been haunting me. Another part of me feared what more pain those answers might bring. I decided to wait until the children were asleep before making any decisions. That night, after tucking Davis and Sarah into bed, I returned to my office and stared at the journal. Finally, I opened it, beginning with entries from around 7 years ago, during the time of Eleanor's depression after Davis's birth. The early entries confirmed much of what Eleanor had told me about her feelings during that period: the overwhelming despair, the disconnection from herself and others, the guilt over not being a better mother or wife. She wrote repeatedly about feeling trapped and unworthy, describing fantasies of escaping her life altogether. As the entries progressed, she began writing about meeting Timothy at Vanessa's birthday party. Her descriptions of their interactions were filled with excitement and longing. She justified pursuing him by convincing herself that our marriage was already effectively over, though she hadn't bothered to inform me of this decision. She described how she crafted elaborate lies to meet him, often with Vanessa's help. The most disturbing entries came after she discovered her pregnancy. She wrote about panicking, unsure who the father was. She described calculating dates and realizing that the probability pointed to Timothy. Yet, she never told him. Instead, she decided to pass the child off as mine to preserve her security and avoid facing the consequences of her actions. The final entries I read described Eleanor's increasing involvement with multiple men, her ability to compartmentalize these relationships, and the strategies she developed to maintain her double life. She wrote without any apparent remorse about the thrill of deception, the validation she felt from these encounters, and her contempt for my continued trust in her. I closed the journal, feeling physically sick. The coldness with which she described her deceptions was beyond anything I could have imagined. There was a calculated quality to her actions that the journal made clearer than any confrontation had. The next morning, I contacted Paula to inform her about the journal. She asked to review it for any potential relevance to our legal proceedings. I delivered it to her office, warning her about the disturbing content. She thanked me and promised to go through it carefully, making notes on anything that might impact our case. 2 days later, Paula called to discuss her findings. She confirmed that the journal provided substantial evidence of Eleanor's deliberate deception regarding Sarah's paternity, strengthening our legal position. More importantly, it contained entries specifically naming Timothy as the man Eleanor believed to be Sarah's father, along with details about their relationship that corroborated his account of events. Paula suggested having the journal professionally evaluated to confirm its authenticity before using it in any legal proceedings. She also recommended sharing the relevant portions with Timothy's lawyer, as it helped establish his relationship with Eleanor and his complete unawareness of Sarah's existence. This information could protect his parental rights while showing that he had been deceived, just like I had. With my permission, Paula arranged for copies of the relevant journal pages to be sent to Timothy's lawyer. She also scheduled a follow-up meeting to discuss the next steps in the legal process of removing my name from Sarah's birth certificate and establishing Timothy as her biological father. The official DNA test comparing Timothy and Sarah was scheduled for the following week. I hadn't yet told Sarah about this, planning to present it as a routine doctor's appointment. Paula had arranged for a child psychologist to be present during the test to ensure Sarah wasn't alarmed or confused by the procedure. The evening before the test, I received a call from Eleanor's mother. She sounded distressed, explaining that Eleanor had attempted to leave the treatment facility without authorization. When prevented from doing so, she had become combative and required physical restraint. She was now under increased supervision and had lost certain privileges within the program. Her mother worried that this incident would negatively affect our custody arrangements. I assured her that while I was concerned about Eleanor's stability, I wouldn't use a single episode against her, as long as she continued with her treatment. I reminded her that the children were doing well and would look forward to visiting her and her husband that weekend as planned. After hanging up, I called Paula to inform her about the incident. She made a note of it, but agreed with my approach, suggesting we monitor the situation without making immediate changes to our agreements. The DNA testing process went smoothly the next day. The psychologist, Dr. Reynolds, was excellent with Sarah, presenting the cheek swab as part of a science experiment that many children were participating in. Sarah seemed to enjoy the attention and the special stickers she received afterward. Timothy was tested separately, avoiding any contact with Sarah at this stage. Dr. Reynolds asked to speak with me privately after Sarah returned to the waiting room with the nurse. She inquired about my plans for telling Sarah about Timothy, offering professional guidance on how to approach such a sensitive topic with a child Sarah's age. She emphasized the importance of age-appropriate honesty, consistency in messaging from all adults involved, and creating space for Sarah to express her feelings without judgment. We scheduled a follow-up appointment to finalize a specific plan once the DNA results were officially confirmed. Dr. Reynolds provided reading materials to help children understand complex family relationships and adjust to significant changes in their lives. The next few days passed quietly as the children continued their routine, splitting time between school activities and visits with their grandparents. I focused on work and therapy, trying to mentally prepare for the upcoming changes. Timothy called once to check on the testing process. Our conversation was brief but cordial. 10 days after the test, the official results arrived, confirming with 99.9% certainty that Timothy was Sarah's biological father. I forwarded the report to Paula, who immediately filed the necessary paperwork to amend Sarah's birth certificate and establish Timothy's legal paternity. With this confirmation, we scheduled a meeting with Dr. Reynolds to finalize our approach for introducing Timothy to Sarah and eventually explaining the situation to her. Timothy, Paula, and I met with the doctor for over 2 hours, discussing various scenarios and potential reactions from Sarah. Dr. Reynolds recommended a gradual approach, starting with introducing Timothy as a family friend. She suggested several casual meetings in neutral, child-friendly locations before any disclosure about his relationship to Sarah. She emphasized that Sarah's emotional security must remain the priority throughout the process, regardless of adult preferences or legal considerations. We developed a timeline spanning several months with regular check-ins and evaluations of Sarah's adjustment at each stage. Dr. Reynolds would be present for key conversations and available for consultations as needed. Timothy expressed complete willingness to follow this plan, acknowledging that building trust with Sarah would take time. The first meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday at a children's museum. Timothy would be introduced as my colleague's brother, who had recently moved to the area. Both Davis and Sarah would attend, providing a normal family outing atmosphere without placing undue focus on Sarah. I spent the days leading up to the meeting helping the children process their mother's extended absence. Davis had started asking more specific questions about Eleanor's condition and treatment. I provided honest but age-appropriate information, emphasizing that she was working hard to get better so she could be the best mother possible. Sarah had become more clingy recently, often wanting to sleep in my bed and seeking frequent reassurance that I wouldn't leave her. Dr. Reynolds had prepared me for this possibility, explaining that children often sense major changes approaching even when not explicitly informed. She advised maintaining consistent routines and providing extra affection without overcompensating or creating new dependency patterns. The morning of the museum visit arrived, bringing a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I explained to the children that we would be meeting a new friend today, keeping my tone casual and positive. Davis asked a few questions about who we were meeting, while Sarah seemed more interested in the museum exhibit she wanted to see. When we arrived, Timothy was waiting in the lobby, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt. He looked nervous but composed, smiling as we approached. I made the introductions, noting with a tightness in my chest how his eyes lingered on Sarah, taking in every detail of her appearance. The initial interaction was slightly awkward, with the children shy around this stranger. Timothy had wisely brought small gifts, a dinosaur keychain for Davis, having learned about his current obsession, and a small plush jellyfish for Sarah, connecting to the ocean exhibit she was excited to see. The thoughtfulness of these selections helped break the ice. We spent 3 hours exploring the museum, gradually falling into natural conversation patterns. Timothy was careful not to focus too much attention on Sarah, dividing his interactions equally between both children. By the time we stopped for lunch in the museum cafe, Davis was enthusiastically explaining his school science project to Timothy, while Sarah had begun asking him direct questions about various exhibits. Watching their interactions, I experienced a complex mix of emotions. There was pain in seeing the clear physical resemblance between them, now unmistakable as they sat side by side. It stirred fear about how this relationship would evolve and what it might mean for my connection with Sarah. Yet, there was also a strange sense of relief in no longer being the only one holding this knowledge, in seeing the first steps toward a new reality taking shape. As we prepared to leave, Timothy thanked the children for showing him around the museum. Sarah surprised everyone by hugging him goodbye, a gesture she typically reserved for people she knew well. Timothy looked momentarily overwhelmed, but carefully returned the hug, meeting my eyes over her head with a look of wonder and gratitude. On the car ride home, both children chattered happily about the day. Davis mentioned liking Timothy and asked if we could see him again sometime, while Sarah nodded in agreement, adding that he knew a lot about jellyfish, which made him pretty smart. I promised we would arrange another outing soon, my voice steadier than I expected. That evening, after the children were asleep, I called Dr. Reynolds to report on the meeting. She was pleased with how it had gone, particularly noting Sarah's spontaneous hug as a positive sign. She reminded me that children often have surprisingly accurate intuition about people, sometimes recognizing connections that adults try to hide. She suggested scheduling the next meeting within 2 weeks to maintain momentum without rushing the relationship. I also called Paula to update her on the meeting. She had received confirmation that the court had accepted our petition to amend Sarah's birth certificate. The process would take several weeks to complete officially, but the legal groundwork was proceeding as planned. She asked about Timothy's behavior during the meeting, clearly concerned about his long-term intentions. I assured her that he had been respectful of boundaries and genuinely focused on Sarah's comfort, rather than asserting his rights. The following week brought an unexpected complication. Eleanor's lawyer contacted Paula to request a meeting about modifications to our temporary custody arrangement. When we arrived at his office, Robert informed us that Eleanor had made significant progress in her treatment program and was requesting video calls with the children twice weekly, in addition to the planned in-person visits after the 30-day mark. Paula questioned whether such frequent contact was advisable, given Eleanor's recent unauthorized departure attempt. Robert acknowledged the incident but presented documentation from her treatment team, indicating that it had been an isolated event triggered by medication adjustments. Her subsequent behavior had been compliant and engaged with the program. After some negotiation, we agreed to one video call per week, supervised by both Eleanor's parents and myself. The calls would be limited to 15 minutes initially, with the possibility of extending them based on how the children responded. Paula insisted on a clause allowing immediate suspension of the calls if Eleanor made any inappropriate comments or displayed concerning behavior. The first video call was scheduled for the following Sunday afternoon at Eleanor's parents' house. I prepared the children by explaining they would get to see and talk to their mother on a computer screen. Davis seemed cautiously excited, while Sarah appeared more confused about the concept. When we arrived at the in-laws' house, they had set up a laptop in the living room with comfortable seating arranged for the children. Eleanor's father explained that the treatment facility had a dedicated room for these calls to ensure privacy for both patients and their families. Eleanor appeared on screen precisely at the scheduled time. She looked noticeably different, thinner, with shorter hair, but somehow more present than she had seemed in years. She smiled broadly when she saw the children, tears immediately forming in her eyes. The conversation started awkwardly, with Eleanor asking general questions about school and activities. Davis answered politely but briefly, while Sarah hid partially behind her brother, occasionally peeking at the screen. As the call progressed, Davis became more animated, telling his mother about his science project and baseball team. Sarah eventually moved closer to the screen, showing Eleanor a drawing she had made. I remained off camera, but within earshot, monitoring the interaction. Eleanor was careful to keep the conversation light and focused on the children, avoiding any mention of our relationship or her situation, other than saying she was at a special hospital and getting better. When Sarah asked when she was coming home, Eleanor gently explained that she needed to stay at the hospital a little longer, but was working hard to see them in person soon. As the 15-minute mark approached, Eleanor's mother signaled that it was time to wrap up. Eleanor told the children she loved them and would talk to them again next week. After the call ended, both children seemed subdued but not upset. Sarah asked if Mommy was still sick, to which I responded honestly that she was getting better but needed more time with the doctors. On the drive home, Davis unexpectedly asked if we would be seeing Timothy again soon. I confirmed that we had plans to meet him at the park that coming weekend. Davis nodded thoughtfully before commenting that maybe Timothy could help him with his new Lego set since he was good at building things. I agreed that it could be a good activity for them. The second meeting with Timothy took place at a local park with a playground and picnic area. This time, Timothy appeared more relaxed, bringing a kite for the children to fly and a simple picnic lunch. The weather was perfect, and we spent several hours outdoors, with the children alternating between flying the kite with Timothy's help and playing on the playground equipment. During quiet moments, while the children played, Timothy and I had more open conversations. He expressed his gratitude for my willingness to include him in Sarah's life, despite the difficult circumstances. He reiterated his commitment to following the psychologist's recommendations and respecting my role as Sarah's primary father figure. He also shared more about his own background, his divorce 5 years earlier, his career achievements, and his previous uncertainty about whether he wanted children. He admitted that the news about Sarah had completely upended his perspective, giving him a purpose he hadn't realized was missing. As the afternoon went on, I found myself less threatened by his presence than I had anticipated. There was something reassuring about his patient approach with Sarah, never pushing for more connection than she naturally offered. By the end of the day, Sarah was comfortable enough to hold his hand while walking back to the cars, chatting excitedly about a butterfly they had seen. The following week marked 30 days since Eleanor entered treatment, and her parents arranged for the children to visit her at the facility, a meeting I chose not to attend. They reported afterward that the visit had gone well, with Eleanor appearing stable and engaged. The children had toured her living quarters, met some of her treatment team, and spent an hour in a supervised family activity. They returned with drawings Eleanor had made for them and seemed content with the experience. Life fell into a new pattern over the next several weeks. The children divided their time between me, their grandparents, and now occasional outings with Timothy. The weekly video calls with Eleanor continued, gradually increasing in length as her stability remained. I attended therapy twice a week, working through my complex feelings about the evolving family structure. After 2 months of these arrangements, Dr. Reynolds suggested it was time to begin preparing Sarah for the truth about Timothy. She recommended a series of age-appropriate conversations, starting with basic concepts about different types of families and how children can have various kinds of parents. Timothy, Dr. Reynolds, and I met several times to plan these conversations, focusing on language that would be clear but not overwhelming for Sarah. We agreed that I would initiate the first discussion, with Timothy joining later conversations as Sarah processed the information. The evening I had selected for the initial conversation arrived quickly. After dinner, while Davis was at a friend's house for a sleepover, I sat with Sarah in the living room, surrounded by some of her favorite books about families. I began by reading one that specifically addressed adopted children and different family structures. After finishing the book, I asked Sarah what she thought about families that looked different from ours. She paused thoughtfully before saying that all families were good if they loved each other. I agreed and gently explained that sometimes families change in unexpected ways, just like ours had when Mommy went to the hospital. I introduced the idea that sometimes children have more than two parents who care about them. Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification. When I mentioned that Timothy was actually her biological father, explaining the term carefully, she looked confused but not upset. Her first question caught me off guard. Does that mean you're not my daddy anymore? I immediately reassured her that I would always be her daddy, that I had raised her since she was born and would continue to be her father no matter what. Timothy was an additional parent, not a replacement. Her next question was just as insightful. Does Davis have a different daddy too? I explained that Davis was biologically my son, but that didn't change my love for either of them. She nodded, processing the information with surprising composure. After a few more questions, Sarah seemed to lose interest in the conversation, asking instead if we could play a game before bedtime. Dr. Reynolds had prepared me for this reaction, explaining that children often need time to absorb important information and may return to it when they're ready, rather than processing everything all at once. In the days that followed, Sarah occasionally asked more specific questions about Timothy, such as why he hadn't been in her life before, if he loved her even though they had just met, and whether she would have to live at his house sometimes. I answered each question honestly and simply, emphasizing that all the adults in her life were working together to ensure she felt safe and loved. The next meeting with Timothy included Dr. Reynolds, who facilitated a more direct conversation about his relationship with Sarah. Timothy explained that he hadn't known about her until recently, but was very happy to be her father now. Sarah listened quietly before asking if she could call him Timothy instead of Dad for now. He readily agreed, telling her that she could decide what felt right for her at any time. As weeks turned into months, our unconventional family arrangement gradually stabilized. Eleanor completed her 90-day inpatient treatment and transitioned to an intensive outpatient program while living with her parents. She kept in regular contact with the children through video calls and supervised visits, slowly rebuilding their trust with consistency. Timothy became an increasingly integrated part of Sarah's life, attending school events and creating traditions unique to their relationship. He maintained respectful boundaries, never attempting to override my parental authority or rush Sarah's acceptance of him. The legal process concluded with Timothy officially recognized as Sarah's biological father, while I retained legal and physical custody. We established a formal co-parenting agreement outlining visitation schedules, decision-making protocols, and financial responsibilities. 6 months after the initial discovery, I found myself sitting on a bench at Sarah's dance recital, flanked by Timothy on one side and Eleanor's parents on the other. Eleanor sat several rows back, as per our agreement for public events. As Sarah performed her routine, her face lighting up when she spotted us in the audience, I felt a brief moment of peace amidst the complicated reality we had created. Nothing about this situation had unfolded as I would have chosen. The pain of betrayal, the shock of learning about Sarah's paternity, and the complete restructuring of my family, all of it had been thrust upon me without my consent. Yet, watching Sarah now, confident and happy despite the upheaval in her young life, I felt a sense of quiet relief. I came to recognize that we had managed to build something functional from the wreckage. My therapist often reminds me that healing isn't a straight line, that I'll continue to feel waves of grief, anger, and acceptance as time goes on. She emphasizes that my emotions remain valid no matter how much time passes. The betrayal I experienced wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the prolonged deception that stripped me of the ability to make informed choices about my own life. I still don't know what the future holds for any of us. Eleanor continues her treatment, showing real signs of remorse and increased self-awareness, though I remain cautious about her long-term stability. Timothy has proven to be a thoughtful and consistent co-parent, allowing his bond with Sarah to grow slowly and on her terms. The children are adjusting with remarkable resilience, something I strive to learn from. As for me, I'm slowly redefining my identity beyond the role of the husband I thought I was and the father I believed myself to be. The truth didn't destroy my relationship with Sarah, as I had feared during my darkest moments. Instead, it transformed it into something different, but no less meaningful. She still runs to me when she's hurt, still asks for bedtime stories, still calls me daddy without hesitation. People sometimes ask if I regret staying in Sarah's life after learning the truth. But the question misunderstands the reality. There was never a decision point, never a moment where walking away felt like an option. From the instant I saw those test results, my focus was solely on her well-being, not the technical definition of our relationship. Biology may have created Sarah, but 6 years of late-night fevers, skin knees, bedtime stories, and Sunday pancakes forged our bond. That truth exists independently of DNA, Eleanor's betrayal, or Timothy's return. My love for Sarah was never rooted in genetics, so the lack of a biological link doesn't change anything essential between us. We continue forward, one day at a time, defining family in a way that fits our unique circumstances. It's not the life I imagined or would have chosen, but it's the life we're creating now, with Sarah's happiness at the center. And maybe, in the end, that's the most any parent can hope to provide. We had just established a tentative co-parenting arrangement. Timothy had begun seeing Sarah, Eleanor was still engaged in her treatment program, and I was focused on keeping life as stable as possible for both kids. Over the past year, that arrangement has solidified in many ways, though not without challenges. Timothy is now a steady presence in Sarah's life. Their relationship progressed gradually, just as Dr. Reynolds had advised. He began with short weekend visits every other week, which eventually expanded to full-day visits and now includes overnight stays twice a month, as well as the occasional weekday dinner when his schedule permits. Sarah adapted to this change more smoothly than I anticipated. After the initial confusion about Timothy's role, she found a rhythm in how she interacts with him. She usually calls him Timothy, though from time to time she introduces him to others as my other father. That phrase developed naturally, and both Timothy and I agreed to let her choose the language that felt right for her, rather than defining it for her. About 6 months ago, Sarah came home from school with a family tree assignment. She asked for my help, unsure how to represent our unconventional family structure. We sat together at the kitchen table with the blank worksheet between us. Without hesitation, she drew 2 branches from her name, one connecting to me, Davis, and my parents, and another leading to Timothy and his family. When Sarah reached Eleanor's place on the family tree, she paused for a moment before connecting her to both branches. The quiet, matter-of-fact way she laid out her understanding of our family brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Timothy has consistently proven himself to be a trustworthy presence in Sarah's life. He consults with me on all decisions, respects the routines we've established, and never tries to undermine my role as her primary parent. He even built a bedroom for her in his home, decorating it with her input, but has always framed it as a part of her extended life, not a replacement for her main home with me. His parents, initially overwhelmed by the sudden discovery of a granddaughter, have become important figures in Sarah's life. Timothy's mother, in particular, has formed a special bond with her, teaching her how to bake and sharing family stories. She's always careful to respect boundaries, coordinating plans with me in advance, and sending Sarah home with handwritten recipes rather than lavish gifts that might create discomfort. Davis's relationship with Timothy took an unexpected turn. Instead of jealousy, Davis showed genuine curiosity. Timothy made sure never to focus solely on Sarah during visits, always including Davis in activities and conversations. The two found shared interests in building and design, with Timothy helping Davis create increasingly intricate Lego constructions. Just last month, he took both kids to a young engineer's workshop, where Davis thrived. My own relationship with Timothy has shifted from tense cooperation to something resembling mutual respect. We communicate daily about Sarah, typically through text messages, and sometimes meet for coffee to discuss longer-term matters. Though we wouldn't call ourselves friends, we've developed a working partnership grounded in Sarah's best interests. With Paula's help, we formalized a co-parenting agreement. It outlines responsibilities, decision-making protocols, and financial contributions. Timothy contributes to Sarah's education fund and covers costs during his parenting time. We agreed early on that maintaining her primary home with me was in her best interest. The agreement includes provisions for periodic reviews and adjustments as Sarah grows and her needs evolve. Dr. Reynolds continued working with Sarah regularly for the first 6 months, then shifted to monthly check-ins. She remains available for consultations as needed and reports that Sarah is adapting remarkably well, showing emotional resilience and intelligence beyond her years. She credits the consistency and low-conflict environment created by all the adults involved, especially the respectful dynamic between Timothy and me. Eleanor's situation has been more complicated. After completing her 90-day inpatient treatment, she transitioned into a structured outpatient program while living with her parents. Her treatment team diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder with narcissistic traits, which helped explain many of the troubling patterns in our marriage. While the diagnosis offered context, it didn't excuse the pain her actions caused. Eleanor's visits with the children gradually increased, starting with supervised time at the treatment center and progressing to longer stays at her parents' home. Reports from both sets of grandparents indicated that she stayed focused on reconnecting with the children and avoided talking about the divorce or criticizing me. 6 months ago, Eleanor moved into a small apartment near her parents and started working part-time at a local bookstore. The added structure appeared to support her recovery well. Her treatment team reported steady participation in therapy and consistent adherence to medication. Eventually, she began having the children for overnight visits every other weekend, with her parents nearby for support. This arrangement ran smoothly until about 3 months ago, when Davis returned from a weekend visit visibly withdrawn. After some gentle prompting, he shared that Eleanor had spent much of the weekend crying and telling the children how much she missed their family and wished they could all be together again. Eleanor hadn't directly criticized me, but she had painted herself as finally being healthy enough for us to be a real family again, if only I could stop being angry and forgive her. I immediately contacted Paula, who arranged for an emergency hearing to address this clear violation of our parenting agreement. The judge responded by temporarily suspending Eleanor's overnight visits, reinstating supervised visitation until a full evaluation could be conducted. To their credit, Eleanor's parents acknowledged her inappropriate behavior and agreed to take on the responsibility of facilitating and supervising all future visits. Eleanor, however, reacted poorly to the restriction. She missed several therapy appointments and began calling me repeatedly, ignoring the communication boundaries outlined in our legal agreement. Her parents eventually persuaded her to resume treatment, but her therapist reported troubling signs of regression, especially when she was faced with the consequences of her actions. 2 weeks after the incident, I received a surprise call from Vanessa. We hadn't spoken since the meeting about Timothy's identity over a year ago. She informed me that Eleanor had been contacting her daily, swinging between tearful apologies and aggressive accusations. The situation escalated when Eleanor showed up at Vanessa's workplace, causing a scene that required security intervention. Vanessa wanted me to be aware in case Eleanor's behavior deteriorated further. I thanked her and contacted Eleanor's treatment team immediately. In response, they increased the frequency of her therapy sessions and adjusted her medications. Her parents reinstated stricter oversight, essentially returning to the structure we had in place when Eleanor first completed inpatient treatment. These interventions appeared effective until last month. Eleanor arrived unannounced at Sarah's dance recital, violating our parenting agreement, which required advanced notice and specific seating arrangements to prevent potential conflict. Although she stayed calm and left without incident when approached by her father, her presence alone breached the terms we had all agreed to. Following this, we held a mediated session that included Eleanor, her parents, her treatment team, Paula, and myself to reevaluate the visitation plan. Her lead psychologist acknowledged the progress Eleanor had made, but emphasized her continued difficulties with respecting boundaries and understanding consequences. The recommendation was to maintain supervised visits for at least another 6 months, with any move toward unsupervised or overnight visits contingent on demonstrated, consistent progress. Eleanor initially resisted, claiming she was being unfairly penalized for minor lapses. However, her parents made it clear they would not support unsupervised access without the endorsement of her treatment team. Faced with this unified stance, Eleanor eventually agreed to the extended period of supervision. Throughout these ongoing challenges, I've made a conscious effort to protect the children from the stress of adult conflicts, while being honest in ways they can understand. When Davis asked why they couldn't stay overnight with their mother anymore, I explained that she was having a hard time managing her feelings and needed some extra help right now. I reassured him that it wasn't his or Sarah's fault, and that many people were working to support her recovery. Sarah, on the other hand, has asked fewer questions, seeming to adjust more easily to the changes. Dr. Reynolds attributes this to a combination of Sarah's naturally adaptable temperament and the strong sense of security she feels in her relationships with me and Timothy. The consistency in those bonds seems to provide a stabilizing force amid the uncertainty surrounding Eleanor. My own emotional journey has been no less complex. For the first 6 months, I attended therapy twice a week, then transitioned to weekly sessions. Therapy has helped me process the layers of betrayal, navigate the emotional fallout, and slowly rebuild my sense of identity. The intense anger that once consumed me has softened into a more reflective, controlled understanding of everything that happened. Though I still experience occasional bursts of anger when reminded of Eleanor's deception, those moments have grown less frequent and easier to manage. Last spring, my therapist gently suggested I consider dating again, observing that continued isolation might not be helpful for my long-term healing. At the time, the idea felt impossible. I couldn't imagine trusting someone enough to enter a relationship. But after several months of exploring the topic in therapy, I've decided to remain open to forming new connections outside of my current circle of close friends and family. In July, I attended a fundraising event for Davis's baseball league, where I met Clara, a divorced mother whose daughter is also on the team. At first, our conversation centered around the kids and the event itself, but as the evening wore on and most other parents had left, we found ourselves still talking. Before parting ways, she gave me her number and invited me to call if I ever wanted to get coffee. It took me 3 weeks to make that call. When I finally did, we arranged to meet for lunch at a cafe near my office. Our conversation was easy and unforced, starting with our children and work, and gradually touching on the general outlines of our past marriages. I gave her a simplified version of my story, sharing that my ex-wife had been unfaithful, and that I later discovered my daughter wasn't biologically mine, though I remained her legal father. I also mentioned Timothy and his role in our lives, wanting to be transparent about our unusual family dynamic. Clara listened without judgment. She shared that her own marriage had ended due to her ex-husband's gambling addiction and the financial ruin it caused. Over the past 4 years, she had worked hard to rebuild stability for herself and her daughter, and only recently felt ready to explore dating again. Her candidness and steady demeanor resonated with me, and we quickly found a mutual understanding through our shared experiences. We've now been seeing each other casually for about 3 months, typically meeting for lunch or dinner when our children are with their other parents. Clara has met Davis and Sarah twice, both times in informal group settings that included her daughter. These low-key interactions, a picnic at the park, an afternoon at the local science museum, were framed as playdates rather than formal introductions. The children seemed to enjoy each other's company. When Davis asked if Clara was my girlfriend, I answered honestly, "We enjoy spending time together, but we're moving slowly." Sarah was less interested in the relationship and more curious about whether Clara's daughter might become a regular playmate. Clara has shown a deep understanding of the complexities involved. She's in no hurry to blend our families, and she's consistently prioritized the children's emotional well-being over the progression of our relationship. Her patience and grounded perspective have allowed things to evolve at a natural pace, free from pressure or expectation. That said, this hasn't been entirely effortless. I've had moments of sharp anxiety, wondering whether I'm making another mistake, missing warning signs, or even capable of forming a healthy relationship after what happened with Eleanor. Therapy has been instrumental in helping me tell the difference between cautious awareness and unfounded fear. My therapist has encouraged me to trust my instincts while remaining open to possibility. Clara, too, has her own reservations, having emerged from her own painful experience. We've found common ground in our shared commitment to moving forward carefully, putting our children's needs first while remaining open to the potential for connection. Whether this relationship deepens over time remains to be seen. Still, the experience has helped me realize that Eleanor's betrayal doesn't have to cast a shadow over all future relationships. Meanwhile, Timothy's romantic life has taken a new turn as well. About 6 months ago, he began dating someone he met through work. He mentioned it to me during one of our coffee meetings, wanting me to hear it directly rather than from Sarah. He approached Sarah's introduction to his new partner with appropriate care, waiting 3 months before arranging a brief meeting. When Sarah came home afterward, she simply said, "Timothy has a friend named Melanie who likes birds," showing no sign of distress. As our unconventional family structure has stabilized, we've successfully navigated several holidays and major events. Last Christmas posed a particular logistical challenge, requiring thoughtful coordination among the various households to ensure the children didn't feel overwhelmed or caught in the middle. We developed a plan that allowed them to spend Christmas Eve with me, Christmas morning with Timothy, for Sarah, a midday gathering with Eleanor and her parents, and finally Christmas dinner with my own parents where Timothy and his parents joined us for dessert. This arrangement placed the children's experience above adult convenience, resulting in a holiday that felt joyful and unified rather than fractured. Sarah's 7th birthday required similar coordination. We held a small family celebration at my home that included Timothy, my parents, and Eleanor's parents, with Eleanor attending for a designated portion of the gathering. The following weekend, Sarah had a party with her friends at a local play center, which all the adults attended without incident. Timothy and I stood together, watching her laugh and play a shared moment of pride that would have felt unimaginable just a year earlier. Work has continued to provide a steady foundation throughout this time. My employers have been supportive and flexible when I've needed to attend court dates or therapy sessions, and my performance has remained strong, possibly because work offers a space where I can focus on something entirely separate from the complexities at home. Financially, things have stabilized. The divorce settlement was finalized 9 months ago with relatively few complications. Eleanor received a modest share of our joint savings, but made no claim on the house or other major assets. Timothy contributes to Sarah's expenses in accordance with our agreement, and Clara and I keep our finances completely separate, each covering our own costs when we spend time together. Looking ahead, we face several important milestones. Davis will start middle school in the fall, a transition he's already feeling anxious about. Sarah continues to thrive in elementary school, but has recently begun asking more complex questions about our family structure, particularly about how to explain it to new friends. Eleanor is expected to complete her current treatment program in 3 months, which will prompt a reevaluation of her progress and may lead to updated visitation plans. Through it all, I've come to understand that family isn't about traditional definitions or biology. It's about showing up, being dependable, and caring genuinely. The family we've formed may not be the one I would have chosen or envisioned, but it functions sometimes imperfectly, occasionally awkwardly, but always with the children's well-being at its core. I've also learned that healing isn't a straight line. There are still days when the weight of Eleanor's betrayal hits me all over again, days when I second-guess every decision I've made since learning the truth. But those moments are becoming less frequent and less consuming. I'm slowly rebuilding trust in my own judgment and accepting that one person's betrayal doesn't define my ability to make wise choices or build meaningful relationships. The children remain my greatest source of strength and joy. Davis has developed a deep love for science, spending hours conducting experiments in the garage while I hover nervously nearby. His resilience has been incredible. Despite his confusion and sadness at times, his optimism continues to shine through. He maintains a relationship with Eleanor and is forging his own bond with Timothy, navigating these complex dynamics with unexpected grace. Sarah, too, becomes more vibrant and multifaceted every day. She shows early artistic talent, filling sketchbooks with increasingly elaborate drawings. As she grows, her understanding of our unique family situation matures, as well, often reflected in her art. Family portraits with extra branches, houses connected by bridges. When a classmate recently asked why she sometimes goes to some man's house on weekends, she simply replied, "That's my other dad, Timothy. I have 2 dads because I'm extra special." Her ability to find light in complicated situations never ceases to amaze me. Just last week, she climbed into my lap during our nightly reading ritual and asked if I'd been sad when I found out Timothy was her first dad. The question surprised me, but I answered truthfully I had been very sad at first because I'd always believed I was her only dad. She thought for a moment, then gently touched my cheek and said, "But now you're okay because you know I love you the most anyway." Her emotional intuition leaves me speechless sometimes. If there's a lesson to be drawn from all of this, it's that family is something we build, not something we inherit. The circumstances that led us here were painful and nothing any of us would have chosen. The betrayal that uncovered Sarah's true paternity caused deep and lasting pain, ripples that continue to affect all our lives. Yet from that difficult truth, we've built something that functions, a structure centered on Sarah's well-being, filled with adults who love her deeply. It may not follow conventional norms, but it prioritizes what matters most. I can't predict what the future holds. Eleanor may continue making progress in her recovery and grow into a more stable, capable parent, or she may continue to face the challenges of her condition. Timothy and I might sustain our current co-parenting dynamic, or future complications could test it. My relationship with Clara may evolve into something enduring, or it may turn out to be a chapter in my healing process. What I do know is this: the children are thriving. Despite the complexity of their family structure, they feel secure, knowing they're surrounded by adults who care deeply and put their needs first. They're developing emotional awareness and adaptability skills that will serve them for life. And that gives me confidence that whatever lies ahead, we'll be able to handle it. To those who have followed this journey from the beginning, thank you. Your support and insights helped me navigate the early days of confusion and heartbreak. And to anyone facing a similar situation, I offer this: trust your instincts, focus on what truly matters, and remain open to support from unexpected places. The road ahead may look nothing like the one you imagined, but it can still lead to something meaningful. It's now been 2.5 years since my last post, and nearly 4 years since the morning I learned about Eleanor's infidelity. Life has changed so profoundly since then that my former reality feels like another lifetime. Davis is now 13, navigating middle school with the typical mix of growing confidence and occasional uncertainty. Sarah is 9, blossoming into a curious, creative child with a strong sense of self. Both children have grown immensely not just in height, but in resilience, empathy, and awareness. Our unconventional family structure has evolved into something steady and workable. Timothy continues to be a consistent presence in Sarah's life, following his every other weekend schedule and occasionally joining her for weeknight dinners. What once felt awkward has developed into a genuine parental bond. Their relationship is distinct from Sarah's and mine, but no less important. They share a natural affinity for design and logical thinking interests that may reflect their biological connection. Last year, Timothy bought a new home with more space, including a larger bedroom for Sarah and a dedicated area for her growing art supplies. He involved me in the process, wanting to ensure the transition wouldn't disrupt her sense of stability. His house is just 15 minutes from mine, making school pickups, drop-offs, and routines seamless. Timothy and I have settled into a co-parenting rhythm that, at times, surprises even us with how well it works. We're in daily contact, usually short texts about logistics, but occasionally deeper conversations about Sarah's emotional or academic development. The boundaries we once enforced so strictly have softened, allowing for flexibility when needed. When Sarah came down with the flu during a weekend at Timothy's house last winter, we coordinated effortlessly, me bringing over her favorite pajamas and Timothy updating me through the night to keep me reassured. Sarah has developed her own language for her blended family. She calls me Dad and refers to Timothy as Papa T, a nickname she coined at age 7. When introducing us, she says simply, "This is my dad and my other dad," with such ease and confidence that people rarely ask follow-up questions. And when more explanation is needed, she provides it with clarity and grace. Just recently, when a classmate asked about her family setup, she replied, "My mom and dad were married when I was born, but later we found out that Papa T is my biological father, so now I have 2 dads who both love me." Sarah's simple explanation reflects the clarity and confidence with which she now views her family. Davis and Timothy, despite not sharing any biological ties, have built a strong and evolving relationship. What began as cautious civility has grown into a genuine mentor-mentee connection, especially through their shared passion for architecture and design. Timothy has supported Davis's interests by involving him in small projects and inviting him to visit his firm, and he regularly attends Davis's baseball games, sitting beside me and cheering without a trace of the old tension that once defined their interactions. Timothy's personal life has also reached a new level of stability. His relationship with Melanie, first mentioned in my previous update, deepened over time, culminating in a small, intimate wedding last summer. Sarah participated as a junior bridesmaid, and Melanie has built a respectful, warm bond with her, never trying to take on a maternal role, but connecting through shared interests and genuine care. Davis was also included in the ceremony, a thoughtful gesture that acknowledged the strong sibling bond between him and Sarah. My own personal life has taken significant steps forward as well. Clara and I continued dating for about a year following my last update, slowly increasing the time we spent together and carefully integrating our families. Her daughter Emily and my children grew close, especially Sarah and Emily, who bonded over their mutual love of horses and art. Clara and I found in one another the patience and empathy that come from shared experiences of heartbreak and rebuilding. 18 months ago, I proposed to Clara during a quiet weekend away while our children were with their other parents. After nearly 3 years of slow, thoughtful relationship building, it felt like the natural next step. She said yes, and 6 months ago, we were married in a simple ceremony in our backyard. Davis stood proudly as my best man, and Sarah and Emily served as bridesmaids. Timothy and Melanie were among the guests, an unconventional choice that raised some eyebrows from traditional family members, but felt entirely right to those of us who had lived this complex journey together. Clara's ex-husband also attended, a reflection of the cooperative co-parenting relationship they've established for Emily's benefit. The ceremony included a special moment where Clara and I made personal vows not just to each other, but to all 3 children. Afterward, Sarah told me that was her favorite part because, in her words, it made us official as a whole family. Davis also surprised everyone by giving a heartfelt toast during the reception, thanking Clara for bringing joy back into our home and welcoming Emily as a sister. A month before the wedding, Clara and Emily moved into our home following a carefully planned transition that involved gradually increasing overnight stays. We converted my home office into a bedroom for Emily, with Sarah and Emily helping to decorate it together. While the adjustment period brought typical challenges navigating routines, sharing space, we handled each issue with openness and flexibility. One of the unexpected blessings of this blended family has been watching the sibling dynamics flourish. Davis, now the eldest of three, has embraced his role with increasing maturity, guiding and supporting the girls while developing a deeper sense of empathy. Sarah and Emily, though not without occasional clashes, have grown close in a way that resembles the bond of biological sisters. They protect each other at school and spend hours lost in their shared imaginary worlds. Clara's approach to our complicated family dynamics has been nothing short of admirable. She supports my ongoing collaboration with Timothy without jealousy or resentment, fully understanding the importance of that relationship for Sarah's well-being. She attends school events and family gatherings where Timothy is present with grace and genuine warmth, helping to ensure that Sarah never feels torn or uncomfortable during special moments. Perhaps the most complicated ongoing element in our lives remains Eleanor. After my last update, she remained committed to her treatment program for another year, showing enough progress that her supervised visitation was gradually eased. Eleanor secured a full-time position at the bookstore where she had previously worked part-time and moved into a slightly larger apartment, providing each child with their own sleeping space during visits. For about 18 months, things progressed relatively smoothly. Eleanor followed the communication protocols outlined in our parenting agreement, limited her discussions with the children to appropriate topics, and appeared to be building a more grounded relationship with them based on their current reality rather than past expectations. However, after Clara and I announced our engagement, Eleanor's behavior began to deteriorate significantly. She started contacting the children outside her designated times, sent me a series of texts that alternated between angry accusations and tearful pleas to reconsider the relationship, and showed up unannounced at one of Davis's baseball games, creating a scene that left him embarrassed in front of his teammates. Following that incident, we returned to court to address the violations of our parenting agreement. The judge ordered a psychological evaluation and temporarily suspended Eleanor's unsupervised visitation pending the results. The evaluation revealed that Eleanor had stopped taking her prescribed medication several months earlier and had been inconsistent in attending therapy sessions, despite having told the court otherwise. Her treatment team recommended that she return to more intensive outpatient therapy and resume supervised visitation until she could demonstrate at least 6 months of stability. Eleanor initially rejected these findings, claiming the evaluation was biased and blaming Clara's presence in our lives as the root cause of the children's supposed distress. When the children's therapist submitted statements refuting these claims, Eleanor became visibly distressed in court, requiring intervention from court officers. As a result, the parenting agreement was revised to include stricter supervision conditions and mandatory treatment compliance, including monitored medication adherence with regular reporting. Eleanor's parents, who had gradually withdrawn from their supervisory role as her behavior had appeared to stabilize, resumed their active involvement to help facilitate visits. The children responded to these developments differently, reflecting their individual ages and temperaments. Davis, now entering early adolescence and naturally gravitating toward peer relationships and independence, began expressing reluctance to spend time with Eleanor. In a session with Dr. Reynolds, who continues to offer periodic check-ins for both children, Davis spoke openly about his mixed feelings toward his mother, love and concern tempered by embarrassment and frustration over her unpredictable behavior. After thoughtful consultation with Dr. Reynolds, we adjusted Davis's visitation schedule to consist of shorter, more frequent interactions rather than extended weekend stays. This arrangement allowed him to maintain contact with Eleanor while also supporting his growing desire for autonomy and social engagement. Though Eleanor initially struggled with this change, she came to accept it with guidance from her therapist. Sarah's relationship with Eleanor posed different challenges. At 9 years old, Sarah has few memories of the more stable time before the truth about our family came to light. Most of her experiences with Eleanor have been framed by supervised visits and treatment-related settings. While she shows an appropriate attachment to her mother, she lacks Davis's conflicted loyalty or longing for an earlier version of our family life. Sarah is more affected by Eleanor's behavioral fluctuations. After the incident at Davis's game, she asked me uncharacteristically direct, "Is mom crazy?" This prompted a difficult but important conversation about mental health. We explained in age-appropriate terms that her mother has an illness that affects how she thinks and feels, much like a physical illness can impact the body. We emphasized that Eleanor loves her deeply, but sometimes struggles to express that love in healthy or consistent ways due to her condition. With Dr. Reynolds' help, We developed language for these discussions that avoids demonizing Eleanor while also not minimizing the effects her actions have on the children. We focus on specific behaviors instead of broad judgments, helping the children understand the distinction between who their mother is and the ways her illness may affect her behavior. This approach allows them to maintain a meaningful connection with Eleanor while developing the emotional tools and boundaries they need to navigate her challenges. Despite ongoing challenges, Eleanor has shown intermittent progress over the past year. When she adheres to her treatment program, she demonstrates increased awareness of her condition and more appropriate interactions with the children. According to her therapist, she has begun, at least in therapeutic settings, to acknowledge that our marriage is permanently over and that her efforts should be directed toward building a healthy co-parenting relationship rather than trying to recreate the past. The most recent development came 3 months ago when Eleanor requested permission to relocate to a city approximately 2 hours away. Her parents had decided to retire to a smaller, more affordable community, and she wished to move with them, recognizing her continued reliance on their support. After consulting with the children's therapist and carefully weighing the potential benefits and challenges, we agreed to the move. We also implemented a revised visitation schedule involving fewer, but longer, visits to accommodate the increased travel distance. Although this change has reduced the frequency of the children's time with Eleanor, the quality of their interactions has actually improved. The structured weekend visits with clear start and end times provide predictability that benefits everyone. Eleanor appears more emotionally regulated in this new arrangement, possibly due to the reduced pressure of more frequent contact or the greater support she receives from her parents in their new environment. Under the new arrangement, the children spend 1 weekend a month with Eleanor and her parents, as well as extended time during school breaks. Video calls occur twice a week, scheduled consistently to align with the children's routines. This arrangement will be reassessed in 6 months to ensure it continues to meet their needs. Timothy has remained supportive throughout, keeping an appropriate distance from direct involvement with Eleanor while offering flexibility in his own schedule to help accommodate Sarah's visitation. When Sarah returns from visits with her mother, he coordinates with me to provide consistent responses to any concerns or questions she may have. My own communication with Eleanor remains strictly limited to parenting matters and is conducted primarily through the court-mandated co-parenting app. Maintaining this boundary has been essential to my ongoing healing and my ability to stay focused on our current family structure. Clara also maintains appropriate distance, never speaking negatively about Eleanor in front of the children, but offering them calm support whenever issues arise related to their mother. Beyond these logistical matters, our daily life has found a rhythm that feels increasingly normal, despite its unconventional origins. Clara and I share parenting responsibilities for all 3 children when they are with us, with natural adjustments based on the varying histories and dynamics of each relationship. Davis and Sarah continue to be primarily bonded to me while developing a respectful and growing affection for Clara, who handles her role with exceptional sensitivity. Emily has adjusted well to our blended household, forming unique connections with each family member. She and Davis share a playful, teasing rapport balanced by occasional meaningful conversations about navigating middle school challenges. With Sarah, she's developed a close, sisterly bond filled with imaginative projects and whispered confidences. Her relationship with me has gradually grown from polite distance to genuine warmth, allowing her to seek my support while maintaining her strong connection with Clara. Clara's ex-husband remains actively involved in Emily's life, participating in regular visitation and school activities. His gambling addiction, which led to their divorce, appears to be under control through continued treatment, allowing for a more stable relationship with his daughter. Clara maintains civil, child-focused communication with him, a dynamic that has served as a helpful model for managing my own co-parenting challenges. Work has continued to provide a welcome sense of structure and accomplishment, separate from family complexities. 2 years ago, I received a significant promotion that brought greater responsibility along with increased flexibility. The additional income from my promotion has been instrumental in managing the increased costs of supporting a larger blended family. Just as importantly, the flexibility in my schedule allows me to be present for meaningful moments in all 3 children's lives. Clara works as a curriculum specialist for the local school district, a position that aligns her schedule with the children's school calendar and enables her to be home during holidays and breaks. We've established household routines that play to each of our strengths and preferences, helping us avoid the friction that often comes with blending families. Financially, we maintain some independence while sharing common household expenses proportionally based on our respective incomes. Timothy continues to contribute to Sarah's needs as per our agreement, including a college fund that has grown significantly over the years. Eleanor provides modest child support when she's able to work consistently, although this has varied due to her ongoing health issues. Clara's ex-husband contributes regular child support for Emily, which Clara primarily invests in Emily's future education, since our daily expenses are otherwise covered. Looking back over the last 4 years, the transformation in all our lives has been profound. What once felt like an impossible situation reeling from the shock of Eleanor's infidelity and Sarah's paternity has evolved into a functioning, even thriving, family structure. At the time, I was engulfed by rage, grief, and confusion, emotions that seemed permanent rather than part of a healing process. I couldn't have envisioned the stability and connection we now enjoy, built from the wreckage of that earlier crisis. This progress wasn't achieved through shortcuts. It involved countless difficult conversations, legal proceedings, therapy sessions, and emotional challenges. The path was neither straightforward nor predictable. What made the difference, I believe, was a steadfast commitment to prioritizing the children's well-being above all else, above personal pride, convenience, societal expectations, or unresolved grievances between adults. That commitment didn't mean sacrificing adult happiness. Rather, it meant consistently making choices that fostered stability, security, and healthy relationships for everyone involved. Sometimes this required painful compromises. Other times it meant creative problem-solving or enforcing firm boundaries that others might not understand. The relationships among the adults reflect this child-centered approach. Given how our lives first intersected, Timothy and I had every reason to view each other with suspicion or hostility. Yet over time, we've built a relationship rooted in mutual respect and a shared dedication to Sarah's well-being. It's not a friendship in the traditional sense, but it is an effective co-parenting partnership. Clara and I came into each other's lives at a time when neither of us was seeking a new relationship. We were both focused on rebuilding stable environments for our children after deeply painful betrayals. That shared focus, along with common values and mutual understanding, allowed something genuine to grow organically without the pressure to replace what was lost or escape from previous wounds. Even my interactions with Eleanor, though minimal and strictly limited to parenting matters, have shifted from raw hostility to something more deliberate and focused. I'll never fully trust her again, and the pain of her betrayal hasn't vanished. But I've reached a place where I can recognize her role in the children's lives without being overwhelmed by our shared history. The children have shown incredible resilience throughout this journey. Davis has navigated the end of his parents' marriage, the arrival of new family members, and the ongoing instability of his mother's mental health with a balance of optimism and empathy. He now possesses a depth of insight into human behavior that many adults never attain, though I do sometimes worry about the emotional weight that comes with such early maturity. Sarah has grown up with this complex family structure as her norm. This brings its own set of challenges and advantages. She moves fluidly between households and relationships with impressive adaptability, though she occasionally expresses a longing for the simpler, more traditional family setups some of her friends enjoy. In those moments, we acknowledge the reality of our family's complexity while reminding her of the deep and varied love that surrounds her. Emily has brought her own history and perspective into our family, adding another dimension to our blended dynamic. Her willingness to form new relationships while cherishing her existing ones has significantly enriched our household. She and Sarah have developed a bond that goes beyond their lack of biological ties, proving once again that family is built through presence and care, not just genetics. My healing journey continues, though the intense pain has long been replaced by something more manageable. Therapy, which I attended weekly for 2 years and now attend monthly, provided essential tools for processing the betrayal without allowing it to define my future relationships. The support from friends and family who stood by me through this ordeal has been invaluable, as have the unexpected connections made with others who have experienced similar challenges. Trust remains the most difficult aspect of moving forward. Clara understood this from the start, never taking offense at my initial hesitations or occasional irrational suspicions. Her patience allowed trust to rebuild gradually through consistent actions rather than forced declarations. The transparency in our relationship isn't built on surveillance or control, but on a mutual commitment to honesty, even when it's tough. 4 years ago, if someone had described my life as it is now, I would have dismissed it as impossible. The idea that I could co-parent peacefully with Sarah's biological father, blend a new family, and reach an understanding with the woman who betrayed me so deeply would have seemed absurd in the midst of my anger and despair. Yet here we are, not in some perfect resolution that erases the pain of what happened, but in a reality that acknowledges that pain while refusing to let it dictate our future. The children are thriving both academically and socially, maintaining appropriate relationships with all the adults in their lives. The adults, in turn, have found ways to interact that prioritize the children's well-being while protecting their own mental and emotional health. Last month, we held a joint birthday celebration for Sarah at a local park. Present were Clara and I, Emily, Timothy and Melanie, Eleanor and her parents, my parents, and several of Sarah's friends. The adults maintained respectful distance where necessary, but worked together on the logistics of the event. Sarah moved seamlessly between the various family groups with confidence, unaware of any tension or divided loyalties. Watching her blow out the candles, surrounded by people who love her despite the complicated journeys that brought us together, was a tangible reminder of what we've accomplished. I've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting or, in some cases, fully forgiving. Instead, it's about finding a way forward that doesn't allow past wounds to define future possibilities. It's recognizing that relationships can end without closing the door to new ones. Most importantly, it's understanding that family isn't defined by conventional structures or biological ties, but by consistent presence, reliable support, and genuine care. To those who have followed this journey from the beginning, thank you for your support, advice, and occasional challenging perspectives. Your input helped shape my thinking during critical decision-making moments when clarity was hard to find. To those facing similar situations, I can offer this advice. Focus relentlessly on what matters most, seek professional guidance, and remain open to unexpected sources of healing and growth. The path forward may not look like you originally planned, but it can still lead to something worth pursuing. While the story continues to unfold in ways both expected and unexpected, it's time to close this particular narrative. We move forward, not defined by the betrayal that initially connected us, but by the relationships we've chosen to build from its aftermath. The children continue to be my greatest source of joy and purpose. Davis approaches his teenage years with thoughtfulness and integrity, making me immensely proud. Sarah expresses herself through increasingly sophisticated artwork, which often captures the complexity of her world with remarkable insight. Emily brings a fresh perspective and energy to our family, reminding us daily of the unexpected gifts that can arise from difficult beginnings. Clara and I are building a marriage grounded in hard-earned wisdom rather than idealistic optimism, appreciating each day of partnership without taking it for granted. Timothy continues to navigate his journey, balancing his role in Sarah's life with his marriage and career. Even Eleanor, despite her ongoing struggles, shows occasional signs of growth and insight, offering hope for a healthier future. Life hasn't turned out as I expected or planned. It's messier, more complex, and in some ways, richer than I could have imagined. The betrayal that once felt like the end of the world has become just one chapter in a longer story, a painful chapter, yes, but not the defining one. What truly defines us is how we've chosen to move forward. The family we've created from unexpected pieces and the love that continues to grow, despite or perhaps because of the challenges we've faced. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.